The prehistoric period. History is a record of the achievements of man. The history of India, like the annals of every other country, should therefore begin with an account of the times when men first settled in this land. But history proper only deals with facts, and facts can only be known from records of some kind or other. We cannot know the history of any people who have left no record of their existence. There may have been people or peoples who lived in India in primitive times, but the evidence of whose existence has not yet been discovered. For the present, at any rate, they must be left out of account altogether. We shall only deal with those inhabitants of India whose existence is known to us from some records they have left behind. To begin with, these records consist almost solely of the rude implements which the people used in their daily lives. According to the nature and material of these implements, the earliest settlers in India have been divided into two classes, Paleolithic and Neolithic. Paleolithic men. The term Paleolithic is derived from two Greek words meaning old stone. This name is applied to the earliest people, as the only evidence of their existence is furnished by a number of crude stone implements. These are small pieces of rough, undressed stones, chipped into various forms, which were originally fitted with handles made of sticks or bones. They served as weapons for hunting wild animals and could also be used as hammers or for purposes of cutting and boring. These chipped stones have been found in large numbers in different parts of India. They are usually, though not exclusively, made of a species of hard rock called quartzite. From this fact, the Paleolithic men in India are also known as quartzite men. From the rough and crude stone implements, which are the only records left behind by the earliest known inhabitants of India, we can form only a very vague idea of their lives and habits. It is obvious that they were ignorant of any metals, and most of them had no fixed homes, though a few might have made huts of some sort with trees and leaves. They lived in constant dread of wild animals like tigers, lions, elephants, and the rhinoceros. They had no idea of agriculture, but lived on the flesh of animals and such fruits and vegetables as grew wild in jungles. They could not make pottery and probably did not even know how to make a fire. In short, from our standpoint, we can only regard them as savages, little removed from an animal life. It is well to remember this if we are to judge aright the long strides that men have made in developing that culture and civilization of which we are so justly proud today. It has been suggested that the Paleolithic men belonged to the Negrito race, like the modern people of the Andaman Islands, and were characterized by short stature, dark skin, woolly hair, and flat noses. Neolithic men. The capacity for progress is, however, an inherent characteristic of human beings which distinguishes them from animals. Consequently, as years rolled by, men acquired greater knowledge and skill in mastering the forces of nature. The rate of progress is, of course, difficult to estimate, and it may have been hundreds or thousands of years before a distinctly higher type of civilization was evolved in India. The men who belong to this age are called Neolithic. This term is also derived from two Greek words meaning new stone. The significance of this name lies in the fact that in this age also men had to depend solely on stone implements and were ignorant of any metals except gold. But their implements were very different from those of the preceding age, for they used stones other than quartzite, and these were not merely chipped, but in most cases ground, grooved, and polished as well. They were highly finished articles made into different pieces. They can be easily and crude implements of the Paleolithic age. Remains of the Neolithic men are found in almost every part of India. An ancient factory for the manufacture of stone implements has been discovered in the Bellary district, where we can still trace the various stages of their construction. The civilization of the Neolithic men shows distinct traces of domesticated animals like the ox and the goat. They knew the art of producing fire by the friction of bamboos or pieces of wood, and made pottery at first by hand and then with a potter's wheel. They lived in caves and decorated their walls by painting scenes of hunting and dancing. A few of these can be seen today both in northern and southern India. They also painted and decorated their pottery. They constructed boats and went out to sea. They could spin cotton and wool and weave cloth. They used to bury their dead, and Neolithic tombs have been discovered in some parts of India. Sometimes the dead body was put in a large urn, and many of these urns have been discovered intact under the ground. The tombs known as dolmens consist of 3 or more stone props in a circle, supporting a massive roof stone. These dolmens, or megalithic tombs, are characteristic of the Neolithic age all over the world. Scholars also distinguish a culture midway between Paleolithic and Neolithic and call it Mesolithic, from Greek meso, middle, hence known as microlith from Greek micro, small. And secondly, that instead of quartzite, they were made of chalcedony and other silicate varieties by a technical process differing from that employed in the Paleolithic age. The age of the Paleolithic and Neolithic men is called prehistoric, as we know hardly anything of this period save the meager evidence supplied by the cave drawings and stone implements. We have not even any definite knowledge regarding the relations between these two groups of men. There are indications that suggest that the Neolithic men may have been the descendants of their Paleolithic predecessors. But there are certain facts which militate against this view. Some scholars are of the opinion that not only are there no such relationships, but that there was a gap of many hundreds or thousands of years between the two periods. So long as our evidence remains as meager as it is now, there will always be scope for such differences of opinion, and we shall have to deal with theories or hypotheses based on speculations. The question, however, belongs to the domain of anthropology rather than history, and need not be pursued any further. The age of metals. There is, however, a general agreement that Neolithic men were the ancestors of the people who ushered in the next stage of civilization, which is distinguished by the knowledge and use of metals. That the transition from stone to metal was a slow and gradual process is proved by 2 undeniable facts: the use of stone and metallic implements side by side, and the close resemblance in the shape of early metal and Neolithic implements. There was, however, no uniformity in the use of metals in different parts of India. In northern India, copper replaced stone as the ordinary material for tools and weapons. Axes, swords, spearheads, and various other objects made of that metal have come to light in different parts of the country. It was not till centuries later that iron came to be known and gradually used as a substitute for copper. We can thus distinguish between a Copper Age and the early Iron Age in northern India. In southern India, however, the Iron Age immediately succeeded the Stone Age, and we find no traces of the intermediate Copper Age. Bronze is a good substitute for copper. It is an alloy made up of 9 parts of copper and 1 of tin, and being harder than copper is more suitable for the manufacture of tools and weapons. We find accordingly that in some countries in Europe a Bronze Age succeeded the Neolithic. Bronze implements of early date have been found in India along with those of copper, but it does not appear that the metal was ever generally used in India to the exclusion of copper. In other words, there was, properly speaking, no Bronze Age in India. With the Copper and Iron Ages, we enter the limits of the historical period. It is a moot point to decide whether the period of the Rig Veda, the earliest period of Indian history for which we possess literary evidence, belongs to the former or to the latter epoch. The general opinion is in favor of the view that the Iron Age had already commenced when the Rig Veda was composed. Be that as it may, we have now a splendid example of the civilization of the Copper Age. This civilization flourished in the Indus Valley and spread over the neighboring regions to a considerable distance. It is known as the Indus Valley Civilization and merits a detailed treatment in view of its importance. But before taking it up, we must say a few words about the races of India. Classes of people. If we examine the people of India, both according to physical type and language, we can easily distinguish 4 broad classes. First, the majority of high-class Hindus who are tall, fair-skinned, and long-nosed, and whose language is derived from Sanskrit. These are known as Aryans or Indo-Aryans. Secondly, the people mostly living in the South Indian peninsula, whose features are somewhat different from those of the first group, and whose languages, Tamil, Telugu, Kannadese, and Malayalam, are entirely different from Sanskrit. These are called by the generic name of Dravidians. Thirdly, primitive tribes living in hills and jungles who offer a striking contrast to the first category in physical type, being short in stature, dark-skinned, and snub-nosed. Their languages are also quite different from those of the preceding 2. The Kols, Bhils, and Mundas belong to this class. Fourthly, a people with strong Mongolian features, beardless, yellow in color, snub-nosed, with flat faces and prominent cheekbones. These mostly live on the slopes of the Himalayas and mountains of Assam. The Gurkhas, Bhutias, and Khasis are striking examples of this class. The last 2 classes of people may be regarded as descendants of the Neolithic peoples. We have already referred to the primitive type of civilization in the Neolithic age, and it does not appear that these peoples have made any appreciable progress during the thousands of years that have elapsed since then. There is hardly any doubt that these primitive races at one time spread all over India. But they had to yield to the superior forces of the Dravidians, who gradually occupied some of their lands. The same process was repeated when large tracts of the country were conquered at a later time by the Aryans. The effect of these successive invasions by more cultured races on the primitive peoples was far-reaching. Many must have perished, and many more, reduced to subjection, formed the lowest strata in the community of the conquerors, while a few bands were saved from a similar fate by the shelter offered by fastnesses and jungles. This last category alone has preserved, to a certain extent, the physical features, the languages, and the habits of the remote ancestors, offering us a fair glimpse of the sort of life they must have lived in times long gone by. Philological researchers have established a connection between these Neolithic peoples of India and the primitive tribes that lived in Indochina, the Malay Peninsula, and the Indian archipelago. The German scholar Schmidt, for example, holds that the languages of the Mundas and Khasis belongs to the same family of speech called Austric, from which those of the peoples of Indochina and Indonesia have been derived. According to this view, these peoples, who were originally settled in India, passed gradually to the east and southeast and traversed at first the whole length of the Indo-Chinese peninsula and then over all the islands of the Pacific Ocean up to its eastern extremity. Schmidt further believed that another current of emigration of the same people also started from India, but turned more directly towards the south and touching only the western fringe of the Pacific Ocean, proceeded, perhaps by way of New Guinea, towards the continent of Australia. According to Schmidt's view, the Neolithic men of India played a dominant part in the early history of Southeastern Asia. But his theory has already been challenged by other scholars and can only be regarded as a provisional hypothesis. The Indus Valley Civilization. In recent years, archaeological excavations have been carried on at Mohenjo-daro in the Larkana district, Sindh, and at Harappa in the Montgomery district of the Punjab. These and smaller trial excavations at various other sites in Sindh, Baluchistan, Punjab, and even further east and south have proved beyond doubt that some 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, a highly civilized community flourished in these regions. The antiquity of civilization in India is thus carried back nearly to the same period which witnessed the growth of ancient civilizations in Egypt, Assyria, and Babylonia. The valley of the Indus thus takes its rank with the valleys of the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates as having contributed to the most ancient phase of human civilization of which we are yet aware. Unfortunately, we have no written records about the Indus Valley civilization comparable to those we possess in respect of the others. A number of seals have been discovered with a few letters engraved on each, but these still remain undeciphered. We are therefore totally ignorant of the political history of the Indus Valley and are not in a position to form an adequate idea of its culture and civilization. We possess, at best, a vague and general idea of the subject which is entirely derived from a careful examination of the objects unearthed at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Mohenjo-daro, Mound of the Dead, is the local name of a high mound situated in the plains of Larkana in a narrow strip of land between the main bed of the Indus River and the western Nara Canal. The surrounding region is wonderfully fertile and is called even today Nakhlistan, or the Garden of Sindh. Here a city was built some 5,000 years ago. This city was successively destroyed and rebuilt no less than 7 times, the inundation of the Indus being perhaps the chief agency of destruction. The rebuilding did not always immediately follow the destruction, but sometimes the city remained in ruins for a considerable period before a new city rose upon them. Thus, after the foundation of the city, many centuries passed before it was finally abandoned. The Harappan culture. Why Harappan culture? The Indus Valley civilization or Harappan culture is older but far more developed than the Chalcolithic cultures. It is called Harappan because this civilization was discovered first in 1921 at the modern site of Harappa in West Punjab, now in Pakistan. No other cultural zone in the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC in the world was as large as the Harappan, 2500 BC to 1800 BC. Its mature phase lay between 2200 BC and 2000 BC. By the 18th century BC, the two important cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, disappeared. But the Harappan culture at other sites faded gradually and continued in its degenerate phase in the outlying fringes in Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana, and western Uttar Pradesh. Dayaram Sahni was associated with the excavations at Harappa, while R.D. Banerjee founded the remains of Mohenjo-daro. The Indian sites near Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Punjab were discovered after partition and indicated that the extent of the civilization was much wider than what was originally thought. So, in a way, the Indus Valley civilization is somewhat of a misnomer. The other contemporary civilizations in the world were the areas around the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea, the Huanghe Valley in China, the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates in Iraq, Mesopotamia, and the Nile Valley in Egypt. Geographical extent. From Sutka Gendor in southern Baluchistan to Alamgirpur in the Meerut district of Uttar Pradesh, the known western and eastern limits of the Indus civilization, it is a distance of over 1,550 kilometers. From north to south, it extends over 1,100 kilometers between Jammu and Bhaktrav in the Kim estuary in Gujarat. Although it flourished over a vast area, the Indus civilization presents little variation. Major sites in Pakistan are Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Kot Diji, Ali Murad, Sutka Gendor, etc. In India, major sites are at Rupar, Punjab, Banwali, Haryana, Lothal, Rangpur, and Sarko Tada, Gujarat, Kalibangan, Rajasthan, Alamgirpur, western UP. It is worth mentioning that Dholavira in the Bachan Taluka of Kutch district in Gujarat is the latest and one of the largest Harappan settlements to be discovered in India. Dr. J.P. Joshi and Dr. R.S. Bisht of the Archaeological Survey of India were involved in the excavation. Dholavira, unlike other sites, has three principal divisions. Town planning. The town planning of the Indus civilization followed the grid system. The roads oriented north-south and east-west cut across one another almost at right angles, and the city was divided into a number of rectangular or square blocks. The main roads, streets, some as much as 30 feet wide, were quite straight. Lampposts at intervals indicated the existence of street lighting. Flanking the streets, lanes and bylanes were well-planned houses. In none of the major cities has any stone building been found. Standardized burnt brick of good quality was the usual building material for dwelling houses and public buildings alike. Elsewhere in the contemporary world, mud bricks and wattle and daub were the usual building materials, and burnt bricks were altogether unknown. The houses, often of 2 or more stories, varied in size, but were all based on much the same plan: a square courtyard around which a number of rooms. The entrances were usually in wide alleys, and no windows faced the streets. The houses had tiled bathrooms, the design of which shows that the people preferred to take their bath by pouring pitchers of water over the head and shoulders. The bathrooms were provided with drains, which flowed into sewers under the main streets, leading to soak pits. The sewers were covered throughout their length by large brick slabs. No other civilization until that of the Romans had so efficient a system of drains. In Kalibangan, many houses show the presence of wells. The towns were generally divided into the citadel and the lower town. The citadel was an oblong artificial platform some 30 to 50 feet high and about 400 by 200 yards in area. It was enclosed by a thick, 13 meters at Harappa, crenellated mud brick wall, externally riveted with burnt bricks, corner towers, and occasional bastions built along the length. Although no separate fortified mound has been found at Lothal, the conception of an acropolis seems to have existed. On the citadel were erected the public buildings, while the lower town was the town proper, in any case at least a square mile in area. At Mohenjo-daro, Mound of the Dead, there lay in the citadel a college, a multi-pillared assembly hall, a public bath, the Great Bath, and a large granary consisting of a podium of square blocks of burnt bricks with a wooden superstructure. Such blocks in mud brick have also been found on the citadel mound at Kalibangan and on the Acropolis at Lothal. But in the citadel of Harappa, we come across a series of brick platforms which form the basis for 2 rows of 6 granaries. At Harappa, to the south of the granary, lay working floors, probably for pounding grain, and 2 rows of workmen's quarters. The Great Bath, measuring 12 meters by 7 meters and 2.4 meters deep, had a floor of burnt bricks. Steps led from either end to the surface, while there were rooms alongside for changing clothes. A large well in an adjacent room was the source of water, and an outlet in a corner of the bath drained it. The bath was probably used for ritual bathing. Economy. The Indus Valley civilization clearly had a well-developed economy. Agriculture. The Indus people sowed seeds in the flood plains in November when the flood water receded, and reaped their harvests of wheat and barley in April before the advent of the next flood. No hoe or plowshare has been discovered, but the furrows discovered in the pre-Harappan phase at Kalibangan show that the fields were ploughed in Rajasthan. The chief crops were wheat, barley, rye, peas, sesamum, mustard, etc. Probably the people of Lothal used rice. The Indus people were the earliest people to produce cotton. To the diet were added melons, bananas, fish, fowl, mutton, beef, and pork. Besides the cattle, both humped and humpless, cats, dogs, and probably elephants were domesticated. The evidence regarding horse and camel is inconclusive. Trade and commerce. Flourishing trade is attested to not only by the granaries, but also by the presence of numerous seals, uniform script, and regulated weights and measures in a wide area. The Harappans carried on considerable trade in stone, metal, shell, etc. within the Harappan cultural zone. They might have carried on all exchanges through barter. The Harappans had commercial links with Rajasthan, Afghanistan, and Iran. They had set up a trading colony in northern Afghanistan, which evidently facilitated trade with Central Asia. The Mesopotamian records from about 2350 BC onwards refer to trade relations with Meluha, the ancient name of the Indus region. The Mesopotamian texts speak of two intermediate trading stations called Dilmun and Makan between Mesopotamia and Meluha. Imports could have been matched by exports as revealed by bales of cloth from Umma in Mesopotamia bearing the imprint of an Indus seal. The findings of seals of Indus style at Ur, Lagash, Susa, Tel Asmar, and other places suggest that perhaps some Indian traders were living in Mesopotamia. That this trade was at least partly seaborne is proved by the discovery of an ancient dockyard at Lothal, connected through the Bhogava River with the Gulf of Cambay. One can visualize Indian ships depicted on a seal and a potsherd from Mohenjo-daro cruising up and down the Arabian Sea. Arts and crafts. The Harappan culture belongs to the Bronze Age. The people of Harappa used many tools and implements of stone, but they were well acquainted with the manufacture and use of bronze. However, bronze tools are not prolific in Harappa. For making bronze, copper was obtained from the Khetri copper mines at Rajasthan and from Baluchistan, and tin from Afghanistan. The bronze smiths produced not only images and utensils, but also various tools and weapons such as axes, saws, knives, and spears. A piece of woven cotton has been recovered from Mohenjo-daro, and textile impressions have been found on several objects. Spindle whorls and needles have also been discovered. Weavers wove cloth of wool and cotton. Boat making was also practiced. Seal making and terracotta manufacture were also important crafts. The goldsmiths made jewelry of silver, gold, copper, bronze, and precious stones. Silver and gold may have been obtained from Afghanistan and precious stones from South India. The Harappans were expert bead makers. The potter's wheel was in full use. The Harappans were not, on the whole, very artistically inclined. The inner walls of their houses were coated with mud plaster without paintings. The outer walls facing the streets were apparently of plain brick. Architecture was austerely utilitarian. Their most notable artistic achievement was perhaps in their seal engravings, especially those of animals. For example, the great Urus bull with its many dewlaps, the rhinoceros with nobly armored hide, the tiger roaring fiercely, etc. The red sandstone torso of a man is particularly impressive for its realism. The bust of another male figure, instated, seems to show an attempt at portraiture. However, most striking of the figurines is perhaps the bronze dancing girl found in Mohenjo-daro. Naked but for a necklace and a series of bangles almost covering one arm, her hair dressed in a complicated coiffure, she stands in a provocative posture, with one arm on her hip and one lanky leg half bent. The Harappans made brilliantly naturalistic models of animals, especially charming being the tiny monkeys and squirrels used as pinheads and beads. For their children, they made cattle toys with movable heads, model monkeys which would slide down a string, little toy carts, and whistles shaped like birds, all of terracotta. They also made rough terracotta statues of women, usually naked or nearly naked, but with elaborate headdresses. These are probably icons of the mother goddess. Technology. In many respects, the Harappans were technologically backward in comparison with Mesopotamia. The Sumerians were very early invented knives and spearheads with ribs in the middle for extra strength and axe heads with holes for the shafts. But the blades of Harappa were flat and easily bent, while the axe head had to be lashed to their handles. In one respect, however, they were technologically advanced compared to their contemporaries. They had devised a saw with undulating teeth, which allowed the dust to escape freely from the cut and much simplified the carpenter's task. Seals. Every merchant or mercantile family probably had a seal bearing an emblem, often of religious character, and a name or brief inscription. The standard Harappa seal was a square or oblong plaque made of steatite stone. The Mesopotamians employed cylinder seals. One or two such seals have been found in Mohenjo-daro. The primary purpose of the seal was probably to mark the ownership of property, but they may have also served as amulets. Script. The Indus script had some 270 characters, which were pictographic in origin, but which had an ideographic or syllabic character. The script has not been deciphered so far, but overlaps of letters and some of the potsherds from Kalibangan show that writing was bostrophodon, or from right to left and from left to right in alternate lines. We are not certain about the writing media, but a small pot found at Chanhu-daro is regarded as an inkwell. Society. The general view is that Indus Valley civilization was not the creation of a homogeneous people. It was a composite product of different races who lived and worked together in a particular environment. Mohenjo-daro had easy land and water communications. It was the meeting ground of people from different parts of Asia. However, in recent times, historians are veering round to the view that the Harappan culture is native to the soil, that the populations at these sites belonged each to a single biological group and probably descended from earlier populations in those regions. From the skeletal remains so far examined, it appears that some of the Harappans were people of the long-headed, narrow-nosed, slender Mediterranean type. A second element was the proto-australoid with flat nose and thick lips. A single skull of Mongolian type has been found, and one of the short-headed Alpine type. Father H. Heras has claimed that the Harappan language was a very primitive form of Tamil. Dress and ornaments. The men wore robes which left one shoulder bare, and the garments of the upper classes were often richly patterned. Beards were worn, and men and women alike had long hair. The coiffures of the women were often elaborate, and pigtails were also popular. Women loved jewelry and wore heavy bangles in profusion, large necklaces, earrings, bracelets, finger rings, girdles, nose studs, and anklets. Religion. The mother goddess was the popular divinity, but the upper classes preferred a god, nude with two horns, much similar to Pasupati Siva. Represented on a seal is a figure with three horned heads in a yogic posture. He is surrounded by an elephant, a tiger, and his throne is a buffalo. Near his feet are two deer. The bull was held sacred. Certain trees, like people, were ascribed divinity. Phallic worship was an important element of religion. Many cone-shaped objects have been found, which seem to be formalized representations of the phallus. Certain large ring-shaped stones have also been found, which represent yonis. However, no temple has been found, though idolatry was practiced. Although no definite proof is available with regard to the disposal of the dead, a broad view is that probably there were three methods of disposing the dead: complete burial, burial after exposure of the body to birds and beasts, and cremation followed by burial of the ashes. The discovery of the cinerary, urns and jars, goblets or vessels with ashes, bones and charcoal may however suggest that during the flourishing period of the Indus Valley culture, the third method was generally in vogue. The people probably believed in ghosts and evil spirits as amulets were worn. Political organization. There is no clear idea about the political organization of the Indus Valley people. Unlike the Mesopotamians and Egyptians, they have not left behind any inscription describing their system of administration. Perhaps the Indus Valley people were more concerned with commerce and they were ruled by a class of merchants. But it can be safely stated that there was an organization like a municipal corporation to look after the civic amenities of the people. Decline. The Harappan culture flourished until 1800 BC. Afterwards, its urban phase marked by systematic town planning, extensive brickwork, art of writing, standard weights and measures, distinction between the citadel and the lower town, use of bronze tools, and red ware pottery painted with black designs practically disappeared. Its stylistic homogeneity disappeared, and the post-urban Harappan stage was marked by sharp stylistic diversity. Some traits of the post-urban Harappan culture are found in Pakistan and in central and western India, in Punjab, Rajasthan, Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, Delhi and western UP. They broadly cover the period from 1800 BC to 1200 BC. The post-urban phase of the Harappan culture is also known as the sub-Indus culture and is more popularly known as the late Harappan culture. Are primarily chalcolithic, in which tools of stone and copper are used. The chalcolithic people in the later Harappan phase lived in villages subsisting on agriculture, stock raising, hunting and fishing. Some places such as Prabhaspatan, Somnath and Rangpur, both in Gujarat, are the direct descendants of the Harappan culture. Some exotic tools and pottery indicate the slow percolation of new peoples in the Indus Valley during the later phases of the Harappan culture. A few signs of insecurity and violence appear in the last phase of Mohenjo-daro. Hoards of jewelry were buried at places and skulls huddled together at one place. New types of axes, daggers, knives, and midribs and flat tangs appear in the upper levels of Mohenjo-daro. They seem to betray some foreign intrusion. At several sites in Punjab and Haryana, painted grey ware, generally associated with the Vedic people, have been found in conjunction with some late Harappan pottery dated around 1200 BC. But we have no archaeological evidence of any mass-scale confrontation between the mature Harappans and the Aryans. Probably the Aryans encountered the people of the late Harappan phase, 1800 BC to 1200 BC. There is not enough evidence to say with certainty that the destroyers of the Indus cities were members of the group of related tribes whose priests composed the Rig Veda, but probably the fall of this great civilization was partly due to the widespread migratory movement of charioteering people which altered the face of the whole civilized world in the second millennium BC. Scholars have assigned several possible reasons for the decline of the civilization. The floods in the Indus rivers might have caused its destruction. It is also supposed that the Indus might have changed its course, thus rendering the valley infertile. The river valley might have lost its charm and the inhabitants might have left it for good. Or perhaps, due to the deficient rainfall and deforestation, there might have appeared desert conditions in the valley. It is even suggested that an earthquake might have caused its destruction, as in Quetta. The Vedic Age. Who were the Aryans? There is good archaeological evidence to show that in the centuries following 2000 BC, northwest India was invaded by some tribes from the west. They were called Aryans, who ultimately occupied the greater part of northern India. It is believed that initially the Aryans lived together in a common place. Subsequently, because of several reasons, the Aryans in groups moved in different directions. A sizable number migrated to India. This branch of Aryans who migrated and settled in India are called Indo-Aryans. Original home of the Aryans. Of the many theories that have been put forward by scholars and historians regarding the original home of the Aryans, the Central Asian theory of Max Muller is accepted most widely. Max Muller has identified Central Asia as the original home of the Aryans. He has based his view on the study of the world's languages. The significant evidence is that there are fundamental similarities among some ancient languages such as Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, and the resemblances continue in the languages derived from them. For instance, Pitri, Sanskrit for father, and Pater, Latin for father, sound similar, and so does Matri and Mater for mother. Max Muller therefore concluded that the ancestors of the Indians, the Greeks, the Romans, the English, and some other peoples must have originally resided at a common place. The Austro-Hungarian theory, propounded by Dr. Giles and Professor MacDonald, consider the banks of the Danube River, southeast Europe, to have been the original home of the Aryans. Putting forward the Saptasindhu theory, many Indian historians, including Dr. Sampurnanand and Avinash Chandra Das, point out that modern Punjab and Sindh region, or Saptasindhu, was where the Aryans originated. The view is based on study of geographical features mentioned in the hymns of the Rig Veda. From the description of certain natural phenomena, such as long evenings, days, and nights of 6 months' duration, etc., in the Rig Veda, Lokmanya Tilak came to the conclusion that the original home of the Aryans was in the regions near the North Pole. He reached this view after the close study of several ancient books, such as the Rig Veda and the Zend-Avesta. Swami Dayanand wrote in the Satyarth Prakash that the original home of the Aryans was Tibet. As their population grew, they could not continue to stay in Tibet and thus migrated towards India. His view is supported by F.E. Pargita. Advent of the Aryans. According to generally accepted views, about 2000 BC, the great steppe land from Poland to Central Asia was inhabited by semi-nomadic barbarians who were tall, comparatively fair, and mostly long-headed. They had tamed the horse to pull light chariots with spoked wheels. They were mainly pastoral, but practiced a little agriculture. They had adopted some Mesopotamian innovations, notably the shaft-hole axe. In the early part of the second millennium, whether from pressure of population, desiccation of pasture lands, or from both causes, these people were on the move. They migrated in bands westwards, southwards, and eastwards, conquering local populations. They brought with them their patrilinear family system, their worship of sky gods, and their horses and chariots. Their original language gradually adapted itself to the tongues of the conquered peoples. Some invaded Europe to become the ancestors of the Greeks, Latins, Celts, and Teutons. Others moved southwards to the Caucasus and the Iranian tableland. The marauding tribesmen also gradually came to India. These invaders of India called themselves Aryas, a word generally anglicized into Aryans. The name was also used by the ancient Persians and survives in the word Iran. The Aryans spoke the Indo-European languages, which are current in changed forms all over Europe, Iran, and the greater part of the Indian subcontinent. Certain names of animals, such as goats, dogs, horses, etc., and names of certain plants, such as pine, maple, etc., are similar to one another in all the Indo-European languages. The Aryans did not lead a settled life, so they could not leave behind any solid material remains. Making their way to India, the Aryans first appeared in Iran, where the Indo-Iranians lived for a long time. We learn about the Aryans in India from the Rig Veda, which is the earliest specimen of the Indo-European languages and has much in common with the Avesta, the oldest text in the Iranian language. Date of immigration. In order to determine the date of the arrival of the Aryans in India, we must first look for the age of the Rig Veda. There is much difference of opinion in this regard. Some lay down the year 1000 BC as the earliest limit for the Rig Vedic hymns, while others consider them to have originated between 3000 and 2500 BC. The most decisive evidence in calculating the age of Rig Veda is the fact that Jainism and Buddhism presuppose its existence. Keeping this in mind, we may conclude that the Aryans appeared in northwestern India not later than 1500 BC. The early Vedic period is roughly dated from 1500 to 1000 BC. The later Vedic period extends from 1000 to 600 BC. The Rig Vedic settlements. Most of the hymns of the Rig Veda were probably composed in the country around the river Saraswati, now lost in the sands of Rajasthan. The Aryan occupation of Afghanistan and the Punjab is proved by the mention in the Rig Veda of the rivers Jagsartas, Kabul, Swat, Kurram, Gumal, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. The Himalayas were well known, but the Vindhyas were unknown. Thus we can safely conclude that the Aryan settlements were confined to eastern Afghanistan, modern Pakistan, Punjab, and parts of modern Uttar Pradesh. The major part of this area was known as the land of Sapta Sindhu, the Indus and its 5 tributaries, and the Saraswati. When the hymns were written, the focus of Aryan culture was the region between the Yamuna and the Satluj. The region was referred to as Brahmavarta and along the upper course of the river Saraswati. To the east, the Aryans had not expanded far beyond the Yamuna, and the Ganga is mentioned only in a late hymn. Narmada finds no mention. Conflicts of the Aryans. At this time, the Aryans had not wholly subjugated the indigenous inhabitants. Though many hymns refer to battles between one Aryan tribe and another, the main conflict was between the Aryans and the indigenous Dasas and Dasyus. The Dasas are described as dark and ill-favored, bull-lipped, snub-nosed worshippers of the Phallus and of hostile speech. They were rich in cattle and dwelt in fortified places called Pur, of which the Aryan war god Indra had destroyed hundreds. Since the Dasas are also mentioned in the ancient Iranian literature, they also seem to have been a branch of the early Aryans. The Rig Veda mentions the defeat of Sambara by a chief called Devodasa, who belonged to the Bharata clan. In this case, the term Dasa appears in the name of Devodasa. Possibly the Dasyus were the original inhabitants of the country, and an Aryan chief who overpowered them was called Trasadasyu. The Aryan chief was soft towards the Dasas, but strongly hostile to the Dasyus. The term Dasyuhatya, slaughter of the Dasyus, is repeatedly mentioned in the Rig Veda. The Dasyus possibly worshipped the Phallus and did not keep cattle for dairy products. Other enemies of the Aryans were the Panij. Panij were wealthy people who refused to patronize the Vedic priests and who stole the cattle of the Aryans. They were not so strongly hated as the Dasyus, and their settlements were left unmolested. Probably the Panijs were Semitic traders. Though many of the vanquished Dasas must have been enslaved, some seem to have come to terms with the conquerors, and one Dasa chief is mentioned as following Aryan ways and patronizing the Brahmins. The Rig Vedic language, even in the earliest stratum, was appreciably affected by non-Aryan influences. The military technique of the early Aryans was much advanced. The Aryans succeeded everywhere because they possessed chariots driven by horses. They introduced the horse and chariot into West Asia and India. The Aryan soldiers were probably equipped also with coats of mail and better arms. The Aryan priestly schools had raised the tribal sacrifice to a fine art, and their poetry was elaborate and formalized. But they had not developed a city civilization. The complete absence of any words connected with writing in the Rig Veda, despite its size and the many contexts in which such words might be expected to occur, is almost certain proof that the Aryans were illiterate. They were a people of warlike stock breeders, organized in tribes rather than in kingdoms. Polity in Rig Vedic age. The tribes were ruled by chiefs who bore the title Rajan. The Rajan was not an absolute monarch, for the government of the tribe was in part the responsibility of the tribal councils like Sabha, Samiti, Gana, and Vidhata. Even women attended the Sabha and the Vidata. The Rajan's post was generally hereditary, but we have mention of election of the king by the tribal assembly Samiti. He protected his tribe and its cattle, fought its war, and offered prayers to gods on its behalf. The king was assisted by a few functionaries, of which Purohit was the most important. The Purohit, by his sacrifices, ensured the prosperity of the tribe in peace and its victory in war. Often he appears as a tribal medicine man, performing magical ceremonies and muttering spells for victory both before and during battle. The next important functionary seems to be the Senani, general, who was responsible under the king for minor campaigns and cattle raids against neighboring tribes. There was no regular or standing army. In times of war, the king mustered a militia whose military functions were performed by different tribal groups like Vrata, Gana, Grama, and Sardha. The Aryans looked on the king primarily as a leader in war, responsible for the defense of the tribe. He was in no sense divine at this early period and had no religious functions except to order sacrifices for the good of the tribe and to support the priests who performed them. The priest king of some other early cultures had no counterpart here. There was no regular revenue system, and the king was maintained by the voluntary tribute of his subjects and the booty won in battle. There is no reference to the judicial functions of the king. There were cases of theft and burglary, especially theft of cows. Spies were employed to check them. The officer who enjoyed authority over the pasture ground was called Vrajapati. He led the heads of the families or the heads of the fighting hordes to battle. In the beginning, the Gramani was just the head of a small tribal fighting unit, but when the unit settled, the Gramani became the head of the village and later became identified with the Vrajpati. Several chieftains were mentioned in the Rig Veda by name, but only one king is recorded as performing any deed of historical importance. This is Sudas, king of the Bharatas, the tribe that dwelled on the upper reaches of the river Saraswati. 3 hymns or poems of the Rig Veda describe the great battle of the 10 kings, at which Sudas defeated a coalition of 10 tribes, 5 Aryan tribes and 5 non-Aryan tribes of Punjab and the northwest on the banks of the river Parushani, the modern Ravi. The most powerful of these 10 tribes was that of the Purus, who dwelt on the lower Saraswati and were the Bharata's western neighbors. Their king, Purukutsa, was apparently killed in the battle. In the succeeding age, we hear no more of either Bharatas or Purus, but a new tribe, that of the Kurus, controlled the old land of the Bharatas and the northern Ganga-Yamuna doab. Rig Vedic society. When the Aryans entered India, there was already a class division in their tribal structure. Even in the earliest hymns, we read of Kshatriya, the nobility, and the vis-a-vis, the ordinary tribesmen, and the records of several other early Indo-European peoples suggest that tribal aristocracy was a feature of Indo-European society, even before the tribes migrated from their original home. As they settled among the darker aboriginals, the Aryans seem to have laid greater stress than before on purity of blood, and class divisions hardened to exclude those Dasas who had found a place on the fringe of Aryan society, and those Aryans who had intermarried with the Dasas and adopted their ways. Both these groups were low on the social scale. The term Varna was used for color, the Aryans being fair, the Dasyus dark. The priests whose sacrificial lore became more and more complicated gradually arrogated higher privileges to themselves. Together with the chiefs, they acquired a larger share of the booty, thus growing at the expense of the common people. Social inequalities thus grew. The Dasas conquered by the Aryans were treated as slaves or Shudras. Gradually, the tribal society got divided into 3 groups: warriors, priests, and commoners. Later, the 4th, Shudra, was added towards the end of the Rig Vedic period. This 4-fold division was given religious sanction as evident from the Purush Sukta hymn, which many scholars contend, however, to be a later interpolation. In this hymn, the 4 classes are said to have emanated from the dismembered primeval man who was sacrificed by the gods at the beginning of the world: Brahman from the mouth, Kshatriya from the arms, Vaishya from the thighs, and Shudra from the feet. Family was the basic unit of society. A group of related families formed a gram, a term which later regularly meant village, but which in the Rig Veda usually refers to a group of kinsfolk rather than to a settlement. The family was staunchly patrilinear and patriarchal. The wife, though she enjoyed a respectable position, was definitely subordinate to her husband. In the Rig Veda, no desire is expressed for daughters, though the desire for children and cattle appears repeatedly. We have an instance of 5 women who composed hymns. Marriage was usually monogamous and indissoluble, for there is no reference to divorce. But there are certain indications of polyandry, levirate, and widow remarriage. There are no examples of child marriage, and the marriageable age in the Rig Veda seems to have been 16 to 17. Divisions based on occupations had started, but this division was not very sharp. Gifts of cattle, chariots, horses, slaves, etc. were given, but there were no gifts of land, and even those of cereals were rare. Kinship was the basis of social structure. People's primary loyalty was to the tribe, Jana. The term for family, Kula, rarely occurs in the Rig Veda. It included not only mother, father, sons, slaves, etc., but many more people also. Probably the term for family was Griha. Differentiation in family relationships leading to the setting up of separate households had not proceeded far. Unequal distribution of the spoils of war created social inequalities, and this helped the rise of princes and priests at the cost of the common people. The Aryans were a wild, turbulent people, and had few of the taboos prevalent in later India. They were much addicted to inebriating drinks, of which they had at least 2, Soma and Sura. Soma was drunk at sacrifices, and its use was sanctified by religion. Sura was purely secular and more potent, and was disapproved by the priestly poets. The Aryans loved music and played the flute, lute, and harp to the accompaniment of cymbal and drums. They used a heptatonic scale. There are references to singing and to dancing girls. People also delighted in gambling. They enjoyed chariot races. Their dress consisted of 2 garments covering the upper and lower parts of the body. Both men and women wore ornaments. Economy. Though they had not developed a city civilization and did not build in stone or brick, the Aryans were technically well equipped. Their bronzesmiths were highly skilled and produced tools and weapons much superior to those of the Harappa culture. Bronzesmiths, carpenters, and chariot makers are frequently mentioned in the Rig Veda with much respect. At the time of the composition of the Rig Veda, the process of smelting iron was hardly known outside Anatolia, where the Hittite kings tried to keep it a secret. Only at the very end of the 2nd millennium BC did the use of iron begin to spread widely over the civilized world, and it is very unlikely that it reached India before this time. As might be expected of a people without cities, the Aryans followed a mixed economy, pastoral and agricultural, in which cattle played a predominant part. Indeed, most of their battles were fought in search of cows, Gavisthi. Cattle were in fact a sort of currency, and values were reckoned in heads of cattle, but they were not held sacred at this time. Both oxen and cows were slaughtered for food. The horse was almost as important as the cow. Though there are references to riding, the horse is more frequently described as the motive power of the chariot. A light chariot with two-spoked wheels, drawn by two horses yoked abreast and carrying two warriors. Among other domestic animals, the Aryans knew the goat and the sheep, which provided wool, their chief textile. The elephant is only mentioned in late hymns and was rarely, if ever, domesticated. A divine bitch, Sarma, plays an important part in a legend, but the dog did not mean as much to the people of the Rig Veda as it did to a kindred Aryan pastoral people, the ancient Iranians, who made it a sacred animal. Agriculture, though important, seems to have been looked on as a rather plebeian. Only one word is used for corn, yava, which later meant barley, but at this time period may have implied all species of cultivated gram. There are references to ploughing, reaping, and irrigation, and to different seasons. In Mesopotamia, the silver shekel, though unstamped, served as a means of exchange, but the Aryans relied for the unit of value and means of barter on the cow. The nishka, a term later used for a gold coin, is also mentioned as a sort of currency, but at this time it was probably a gold ornament of some kind. There is no mention of a regular class of merchants or moneylenders, though indebtedness is sometimes referred to. Poetry of the Rig Veda. The art of poetry was in full bloom, as is evidenced by the splendid collection of lyrics known as Rig Samhita, which consists of hymns in praise of different gods. The total number of hymns is 1028. These are grouped into 10 books termed Ashtakas or Mandalas, containing hymns of 8 and 10 verses respectively, which were recited by priest-styled hotris or reciters. There are altogether 10,600 verses. The old hymns are chiefly to be found in the family books 2 to 7, each of which is ascribed to a particular family of seers, rishis, Grita Samada, Visvamitra, Vamadeva, Atri, Bharadwaj, and Vashishtha. Book 8 is ascribed to the Kanvas and Angirasis. Book 9 is dedicated to Soma. The latest parts of the collection are to be found in books 1 and 10. Religion. The Aryans personified the natural forces and looked upon them as living beings. The most important divinity was Indra, who played the role of a warlord, leading the Aryan soldiers to victory against the demons. 250 hymns are devoted to him. He was regarded as the rain god. The second position was held by Agni, fire god, to whom 200 hymns are devoted. The oblations offered to Agni were supposed to be carried in the form of smoke to the sky and thus transmitted to the gods. Varuna personified water and was supposed to uphold the natural order. Soma was considered to be the god of plants. The Maruts personified the storm. We also find some female divinities, though not very important, such as Aditi and Ushas, who represented the appearance of the dawn. Gods were mainly worshipped through the recitation of prayers and offering of sacrifices. Every tribe or clan had a special god to worship. Vegetables, cereals, etc. were offered in sacrifices, but without any ritual or sacrificial formulae. No particular words were assigned any magical power. Worship of gods was not meant for spiritual uplift or moksha, but for praja, children, pashu, cattle, food, wealth, health, etc., that is, for material prosperity. The early Vedic religion is also known as henotheism, a belief in single gods, each in turn standing out as the highest. It has also been described as the worship of nature. Another important feature was the tendency towards monotheism and even monism. The use of material objects as symbols of deities was perhaps not altogether unknown. Regarding life after death, the Rig Vedic hymns have no consistent theory. Aryan expansion. In the later Vedic period, 1000 to 600 BC, the Aryans spread out from their early settlements in Afghanistan and Punjab to the Ganga-Yamuna Doab. Towards the east, the Aryans penetrated into Kosala, Kashi, Videha, Magad, Anga, etc. The Kurus and the Panchalas were the leading Aryan tribes. References to the Andhras and the Pulindas prove the emerging Aryan contact with the south. In the beginning, they cleared the land by burning, later with the use of iron tools, which became common by 1800 BC. Archaeologists have excavated parts of a few sites of this period, such as Hastinapur, Ahikchatra, and Kausambi. The town of Hastinapur was almost completely destroyed by flood at the end of its existence, and little remains but shreds of painted grey pottery, a few copper implements, and traces of houses of unbaked bricks. Kausambi has produced similar pottery, a little iron, and remains of a well-made city, well faced with burnt brick. While the Aryans had by now expanded far into India, their old home in Punjab and northwest was practically forgotten. Later Vedic literature mentions it rarely, and then usually with disparagement and contempt, as an impure land where the Vedic sacrifices were not performed. It may have been once more invaded by Indo-Iranian tribes who did not follow the orthodox rites. Later Vedic age, polity. The king's power increased. He now ruled over kingdoms rather than over nomadic tribes. Tribal character was not wholly lost, but the kings established permanent capitals and a rudimentary administrative system. The old tribal assemblies of the Rig Vedic times were still extant, but their power was waning rapidly. And by the end of this period, the king's autocracy was limited only by the power of the Brahmins, tradition, and public opinion. At places, the old tribal organizations adapted themselves to the changed conditions, and Ganas, or tribal republics, like those of the Sakyas and the Lichavis, survived for many centuries in outlying districts. However, political divisions based on kinship were giving place to those based on geography. If the popular assemblies had lost power, another element in the state was rising in influence. The Ratnins, or jewel bearers, the relatives, courtiers, and palace officials of the king. These elements became so important that at the king's consecration, special sacrifices were performed to ensure their loyalty. The list of Ratnins included the Purohit, Senani, Chamberlain, royal charioteer, Samgrahitri, the treasurer, Bhagadugha, revenue collector, etc. Royal pretensions were supported by grand royal sacrifices like Rajasuya, Vajapya, Ashwamedha, etc. The judicial machinery had crystallized. Death penalty was still absent. The king now lived on taxes, not voluntary tributes. A standing army was still absent, and according to one ritual for success in war, the king had to eat along with his people from the same plate. Society. The fourfold division of society became clear. The power of the Brahmins increased so much that they sometimes came into conflict with the Rajnayas for supremacy. But when the two upper orders faced the lower order, they would make up their differences. However, the Vaishyas, along with the Brahmins and Rajnayas or Kshatriyas, were entitled to Upanayan, or investiture with a sacred thread. The Shudras were deprived of this ceremony. Certain sections of artisans, such as Rathkar, chariot makers, enjoyed a high status and were allowed Upanayan. In the family, father's power increased, and he could even disinherit his son. In princely families, the rule of primogeniture was being consolidated. Women's status deteriorated. The institution of Gotra appeared. People began to practice Gotra exogamy. Of the 4 ashrams or 4 stages of life, only 3, Brahmachari, Grihastha, and Vanaprastha, are mentioned. Economy. By now, the Aryans had nearly all the equipments of a civilization of the ancient type. Whereas the Rig Veda speaks only of gold and copper or bronze, the later Vedic texts also mention tin, lead, silver, and iron. The elephant was tamed, though little used in war. The Aryans now cultivated a large range of crops, including rice, and they understood something of irrigation and manuring. Specialized trades and crafts had appeared. In place of the few craftsmen in the Rig Veda, many are now referred to, including jewelers, goldsmiths, metal workers, basket makers, rope makers, weavers, dyers, carpenters, and potters. Various types of domestic servants are mentioned, and a rudimentary entertainment industry existed with professional acrobats, fortune tellers, flute players, and dancers, while there are also references to usurers and merchants. Still, there is no mention of coined money or writing. After a break of many centuries, Indian merchandise was again finding its way to Mesopotamia. Pottery of later Vedic age. The later Vedic people used 4 types of pottery: black and red ware, black slipped ware, painted grey ware, and red ware. The last type of pottery was most popular with them and has been found almost all over western UP. However, the most distinctive pottery of the period is known as painted grey ware, which comprised bowls and dishes used either for rituals or for eating by the upper classes. Philosophy and literature of later Vedic age. The corpus of later Vedic literature comprises the later 3 Vedas, Sam, Yajur, and Atharva. The Brahmans, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads, all written during the 1000 to 600 BC. The word Veda is derived from the word Vid, that is to know. Thus, Veda means knowledge or wisdom. Together with the Rig Veda, the whole corpus of Vedic literature is termed as Shruti, that is, not written by man but revealed to certain seers by God. However, the Aryan literature also includes the 4 Upaveds and the 6 Vedangas, together termed as the Smriti literature, that is not divine in nature but written by ordinary mortals. Vedic literature can be divided into 4 groups. First, there are Samhitas, or collection of hymns, prayers, sacrificial formulae, etc. The Rig Veda Samhita is the oldest and the most important. The Sam Veda Samhita consists of 1,549 hymns, of which all but 75 are found in the Rig Veda Samhita. Its hymns were used for singing at sacrifices. The Yajurveda Samhita consists partly of hymns and partly of prose. containing sacrificial formulae. It is divided into white Yajurveda and black Yajurveda. The Atharvaveda Samhita, the latest of the Vedas, is a book of magical formulae, and its hymns deal mainly with charms and spells to control demons and spirits. It is divided into 20 books and contains about 731 hymns. Second, the Brahmanas are notes in prose, and they explain the origin and meaning of the various hymns of the Samhitas. The Aitarya and Kaushitaki Brahmanas are assigned to the Rigveda. Tandya and Jaiminya Brahmanas to the Samveda. Jaitirya and Satapatha Brahmanas to the Yajurveda, and the Gopath Brahmana to the Atharvaveda. The Brahmanas also contain cosmogonic myths, old legends, and gathas or verses celebrating the exploits of kings famed in priestly tradition. Third, next came the Aranyakas or forest texts, books of instruction to be given in the forest or writings meant for wood-dwelling hermits, which are found as appendices to the Brahmanas. These treatises combined the Brahmanas in language, style, and even context, but they are concerned more with the allegorical significance of rites and the mystic meaning of the Samhitas. Fourth, lastly, we have the Upanishads, secret or esoteric doctrines. The name is derived by some from the root Upanisad, which means to sit down near someone, and is applied to doctrines that may be imparted to a son or a trusted pupil seated near the teacher. The Upanishads are either embedded in the Aranyakas or form their supplements. They are also found as independent works. They contain deep speculations of a philosophical character which revolve around the two conceptions of Brahman and Atman. The Upanishads marked a reaction against sacrificial religion and are highly philosophical, dealing with the ultimate truth and reality, knowledge of which would emancipate a man. Important Upanishads are Mundaka, Jaitirya, Aitarya, Chandogya, Katha. Besides, there are other ancient literary works which relate to the later Vedic period. Firstly, there are 6 Vedangas, limbs of the Vedas. 1. Siksha, pronunciation. 2. Kalpa, ritual. 3. Vyakran, grammar. 4. Nirukta, etymology. 5. Chandas, meter. And 6. Jyotisha, astronomy. They are composed in the form of sutras, short rules for memorizing. Secondly, there are 4 Upavedas. First, Ayurveda. 2. Dhanurveda. Third, Gandharvaveda. And 4th, Shilpaveda. The study of Aryan literature will remain incomplete without mentioning the 6 prominent schools of Hindu philosophy. First, Kapil's Sankhya. Second, Patanjali's Yoga. Third, Gautam's Nyay. Fourth, Kannada's Vaisiksha. Fifth, Gemini's Purva Mimasa. And 6th, Vyasa's Uttara Mimasa.
The Ajivakas, Gosala Masakariputra was the founder of the sect of Ajivakas. The Ajivakas prospered briefly in modern times, but the sect declined rapidly thereafter. No scripture of Ajivakas have come down to us, and all knowledge about Ajivakas has to be reconstructed from the polemic literature of Buddhism and Jainism. The sect was atheistic, and its main feature was a strict determinism. According to Ajivakas, the whole universe was conditioned and determined to the smallest detail by an impersonal cosmic principle. The Ajivika monks practiced severe asceticism. The doctrine of destiny of Ajivikas resembled the Parmenidean view that all change and movement were illusory and that the world was in reality eternally and immovably at rest. Materialism. Ajit Viskambalan was the earliest known teacher of complete materialism. The materialist schools came to be known as Charvakas or Lokayatas. The general attitude of materialist school was that all religious observance and morality were futile and useless. One should try to take maximum pleasure out of life. Occasional sorrow must be accepted for the sake of joy which one finds in life. The materialist literature has not survived, and the knowledge about materialist is derived from other works which talk about them. The first emperor of modern dynasty was Chandragupta Maurya, who wrested the power from Nandas. The classical Greek sources speak of a Sandrocotus who allied with Greeks and exhorted them to invade the Nandas. Greek and Indian sources agree that Chandragupta overthrew the last of the Nandas and occupied his capital Patliputra. A 6th century AD play, Mudra Rakshasa, by Vishkadatt, depicts Chandragupta Maurya as a weak and insignificant man and the real ruler of the empire being Chanakya. After Alexander left India, his general Seleucus Nicator made Chandragupta Maurya in battle in about 305 BC and seems to have suffered great defeat. Peace was concluded with Seleucus and his daughter was married to Chandragupta. Seleucus sent an ambassador Megasthenes to India, and the envoy wrote a detailed account of India entitled Indica. Although no manuscript of Indica has survived, but many Greek and Latin authors have quoted abundantly from it, and from their works it might be partially reconstructed. The Arthashastra, treatise which contained genuine Mauryan reminiscences, was written by Chanakya. According to Indica and Arthashastra, the Mauryan administration had developed a highly organized bureaucratic system and a very thorough espionage system. Megasthenes has admired Chandragupta for his efficient administration of justice. Other than driving out the Greek garrisons from northwest, Chandragupta is also believed to have conquered Gujarat, Kathiawar, and some parts of Deccan. According to Jain tradition, Chandragupta Maurya abdicated his throne in about 300 BC and starved himself to death in around 298 BC at Saravanabelagola near Mysore. Bindusara. Chandragupta Maurya was succeeded by his son Bindusara, who kept the empire intact. He was contemporary of King Antiochus I, the Seleucid king of Syria. Bindusara is said to have asked the king to send a gift of figs, wine, and a sophist. Antiochus sent figs and wine, but replied that Greek philosophers or sophists were not for export. The successor of Bindusara was Ashoka. Before he came to the throne, Ashoka was viceroy of Taxila and Ujjain. Ashoka probably fought only one war, the Kalinga War. After this war, he became deeply religious and turned to Buddhism. He advocated the doctrine of Ahimsa and believed in conquest by righteousness or Dhamma Vijaya. There is little evidence to suggest that pacifist policies of Ashoka were responsible for weakening of Mauryan army. He warned the tribesmen of hills and forests not to harass the more civilized villages, and he was ready to repress them by force if they continued their raids. He makes no mention of reducing the army, and despite his remorse at the conquest of Kalinga, he did not restore it to its original rulers. Ashoka did many useful public works like improving the communication system of his empire, planting fruit trees along the roads to provide shade and food, digging wells at intervals and setting up rest houses for weary travelers. He appointed a special category of officers called officers of righteousness or Dharam Mahamatras to implement his reform works. Ashoka also sent his son Mahendra and daughter Sanghamitra to Ceylon to propagate his gospel. King Divan Ampiatisa of Ceylon was the first convert of Mahendra. Ashoka died about 232 BC. His successors were too weak to keep such a vast empire intact. The last king of Maurya dynasty, according to most historians, was Brihadatta, who was assassinated by Senapati Pushyamitra in 185 BC, and a new dynasty was founded by him called Shunga dynasty. There were several factors which are listed as a cause of the fall of modern empire. Ashoka's support to Buddhism antagonized Brahmins. The revenue from agrarian areas was not sufficient to maintain such a large empire. It was also argued that Ashoka's non-violent attitude affected the military strength of empire. The immediate cause could have been invasion of Bactrian Greeks and murder of Brihadatta by Pushyamitra Shunga. But the most likely cause is that the empire had grown too big for any emperor to sustain it for long and run the administration in the empire with efficiency. Mauryan administration. King was the supreme authority in the Mauryan Empire. He had unlimited powers. He led his army in war and was supreme authority in administration of justice as well. He appointed the Council of Ministers. The administration of Mauryan Empire was carried on by an organized, efficient, and highly centralized bureaucracy. Following were the important officials during Mauryan Empire. First, Sanidhata, that is, he was a head of treasury. 2. Samaharata was collector of revenue. 3. Purohita was the chief priest. 4. Senapati was a gatekeeper of the royal palace. 5. Antaramiseka was head of the harem guards. 6. Durgapala was the head of the fort. And 7. Amatyas were executive officers. According to Arthashastra, 27 Adhyakshas were appointed by the state to regulate economic activities. Provincial administration. The Mauryan Empire was divided into a number of provinces. A viceroy called Mahamatra was governor of the province. The Mahamatras were assisted by Yuta, the tax collector, or Rajuka, the revenue collector, and Sthaniks, the district officers. Municipal administration. The municipal administration of Mauryans was highly developed. There were 30 members in the committee to carry on the day-to-day administration of city. The committee was divided into 6 boards of 5 members each. One board looked after the arts and crafts, another after foreigners, a third after registration of births and deaths, a fourth after trade and commerce, a fifth after manufactured articles in the town, and lastly, one after the collection of sales tax. The chief revenue of the government was land tax and varied from 1/4 to 1/6 of the total produce according to the fertility of the land. Judicial laws were severe and robbery and theft were severely punished. Espionage system of Mauryans was carried out by a network of spies throughout the country. The Mauryas kept a large and powerful army. Megasthenes put the strength of Chandragupta's force at 6 lakh infantry, 3 lakh cavalry, and 9,000 elephant. Society and economy during Mauryan Empire. Megasthenes has praised the society of modern times. According to him, people were very honest and their moral standards were very high. Their standard of living was also very high. The caste system was rigid, and to change one's caste was almost impossible. According to Megasthenes, the Indian society comprised of 7 castes or classes, but It is clear that Megasthenes confuses the occupations as basis of caste, although Megasthenes has written that slavery was not known in modern empire, but historians do not agree with Megasthenes on this point. They say that slavery was present in India, but it differed in form and nature from that of Greece and Rome. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism were popular religions of the time, and there existed some rivalry between them. Although Ashoka adopted Buddhism as his personal religion, he evolved an ethical conduct called Dhamma, Dhamma, which was the essence of all religions. It consisted of such precepts like respecting and obeying one's elders, affection, maintaining good relations with neighbors, etc. Economy during modern time was mainly agrarian, and majority of population were agriculturalists. In a sphere of trade and industry, state had monopoly over mining and the production of many trade articles such as liquor and arms. Indian silk and cotton was in much demand in Western countries. The Srenis, S-R-E-N-I-S, or guilds, managed internal and external trade. There were coins of different metals for the purpose of exchange. The most popular among them was silver coin and Karshapana, a copper coin, K-A-R-S-H-A-P-A-N-A, Karshapana. Art and architecture. The architecture remains of modern period have not survived. Chandragupta Maurya built his palace and capital apparently of wood at Patliputra. The palace is said to have been destroyed by a fire. It is the art of sculpture and rock cutting of Ashoka period which is the best art of modern period. The 4 rock-cut sanctuaries on the Barabar hills and 3 on Nagarjuna hills near Gaya are among the earliest examples of rock-cut architecture in India. Ashoka's pillars are built out of single rocks and bear capitals decorated with animals, birds, or human figures. Ashoka also constructed the stupas or solid dome-like structures of rock or brick for preserving the relics of Buddha. Caves built during this period also reflect modern art. Caves were constructed out of hard, refractory rocks and served as assembly halls for various occasions. Post-modern period, 200 BC to 300. After the fall of modern empire, many dynasties vied with each other for regional dominance. The main among these were the Shungas, the Kanavas, the Chetis of Kalanga, and the Satvahans. The Shungas. The Shunga dynasty was founded by Pushyamitra Shunga after killing the last modern king Birhadatta. The dominion of Pushyamitra extended up to eastern Punjab in the west and to central India, with Vidisa as its capital. Agnimitra was Pushyamitra's son, and he was instrumental in suppressing the revolt of Vidrabha. After him, the Shunga dynasty had weak rulers and it gradually declined. The Shunga rulers associated with the revival of Brahmanism. The practice of Vedic sacrifices were popularized under him. Sanskrit literature flourished under Shunga dynasty. Patanjali, the great grammarian who wrote Mahabhasya, was born in this period. The last ruler of Shunga dynasty, Devabhuti, was murdered by his minister Vasudeva Kanva, who founded the Kanva dynasty. This dynasty ruled for about 45 years, and with the rise of Satvahan power in Deccan and foreign invasions in north, this dynasty came to an end. Kharavela was the most famous ruler of the dynasty of the Chetis of Kalanga. The Hathigumpa inscription near Bhubaneswar gives information about Chetis and Kharavela. Kharavela is said to have defied the Satavahan ruler Satakarni and became free of Magadha Empire. In south, he pushed beyond Godavari. Kharavela was a follower of Jainism and patronized Jain monks for whom he constructed caves in Udayagiri. The Satvahans came into power in Deccan after ending the rule of Shungas and Kanavas. Simuka, S-I-M-U-K-A, is regarded as the founder of this dynasty. Hala is considered another famous king of this dynasty. Hala was followed by Sri Satakarni, who is identified with the Satakarni of Nanaghat inscription and the husband of Queen Naganika. His capital was at Pratisthan or Paithan on the banks of Godavari in Maharashtra. The next most famous ruler of this dynasty was Gautami Putra Satakarni, who saved the Deccan from the Saka onslaughts. He defeated the Saka king Nathapana by defeating him in a keenly contested war. He also overthrew the Greeks and the Parthians. Gautami Putra was succeeded by his son Vashishta Putra Pulumai. His influence extended to the Coromandel coast and to some portions of Madhya Pradesh. His successor was Vashishta Putra, who was married to the daughter of the Saka ruler Rudramana I. After Yajna Shri Satakarni, one of the last rulers of Satvahan dynasty, the Satvahan dynasty began to decline and it was partitioned among 5 minor dynasties. Social and economic conditions in Deccan under Satvahans. The kingdom of Satvahans was divided into Janapadas and Aharas. The source of income were taxes on land income, court fees and fines, proceeds from royal domain, etc. Monarchy was hereditary and Satavahan kings wielded unlimited power, although the administration of Satavahan king was checked by custom and Shastric injunction. The kingdom was famous for the production of rice and cotton. According to Pliny, the Andhra kingdom maintained an army of 1 lakh infantry, 2,000 cavalry, and 1,000 elephants. The use of coins, burnt bricks, ring wells, etc. was learned through contacts with North. The 4th fold Varana system was recognized by the Satavahans, and Gautami Putra Satakarni claims to have re-established the 4-fold Varana system. In the society under Satavahans, there were at least 4 recognizable classes. The Mahabhojas, Maharathis, and Mahasenapatis were the highest elite of the society. The officers like Amatayas, Mahamatras, Bandhagharikas, and non-official comprised the 2nd class. The 3rd class consisted of Vaidya, Lakhaka, Swarnakarna, etc. And the 4th class comprised the Malakara, Vardhaki, Dasaka, etc. The Satavahan kings were named after their mothers like Gautami Putra, Vashishti Putra, etc., which shows that mother enjoyed a good deal of importance, but basically the Satavahana ruling family was patriarchal because succession to the throne passed to the male members. Satavahans worshipped a large number of gods such as Krishna, Vasudeva, and others. But Buddhism also prospered under Satavahanas. Nagarjunkonda and Amravati in Andhra Pradesh became important Buddhist centers under Satavahans. The Amravati stupa began in 200 BC but was completed in 2nd century AD. The stupa is full of sculptures based on scenes from the life of Buddha. The official language of Satavahan was Prakrit. One Prakrit text called Gatha Saptashti is attributed to a Satvahana king, Hala. We come to foreign invasion north to west on page 30. While in the mainland, the Mauryan dynasty was succeeded by Shungas, Kanvas, Satyavahans, etc. In northwest, there was a new onslaught by foreign invaders. The Indo-Greeks, the Shakas, the Parthians, and the Kushans were foreign powers. First, the Indo-Greeks. Small colonies of Asiatic Greeks had been settled in Bactria by Archimedes, and though these were strengthened by settlement established by Alexander and Seleucus Nictator. About the middle of 3rd century BC, Bactria became independent of Seleucid Empire. By 2nd century BC, Euthydemus and his son Demetrius were gaining a foothold in the Indus Valley and Punjab and laid great raids far into Ganga Valley. Although the home domain of Bactrian Greeks was wrested from them by Eucratides They continued to rule in Punjab and parts of northwest and came to be known as Indo-Greeks. The Greek domains in India were divided into several petty kingdoms. The history of Indo-Greeks in India is mostly reconstructed from their remarkable coins. These coins bear legends in Greeks on one side and in Prakrit on the other. The Greeks' rule introduced features of Hellenistic art in northwestern India. This art, in combination with the local art, gave rise to what is called Gandhara art. Astrology and medicine also entered India through Indo-Greek kingdom. In Indian literature, Indo-Greeks are mentioned as Yavans. One of the Greeks kings of Punjab, Milinda or Menander, is especially remembered for his espousing of Buddhism, and his discussions with Nagasena are recorded in the Pali text Milinda Panho. Manu described the Yavanas as degenerate Kshatriyas and gives them a place in Hindu society. Second, Sakas. Sakas were the nomads from Central Asia who were driven by a complex chain of causes, both climatic and political, which led them to leave their homes. These circumstances were the consolidation of Chinese empire under the great emperor Shi Huangdi and the building of Great Wall of China, as well as the drying up of central pasture lands. Because of a strong Chinese empire, the nomads could not move towards that direction. Therefore, they attacked Bactria, which they occupied, soon to be followed by Yueh-Chih, Yuehchich. The Sakas moved on from Bactria to attack first the Parthian rulers of Iran and then the Greeks in India. There were 5 branches of Sakas with their seats of power in different parts of India and Afghanistan. One branch of Sakas settled in Afghanistan, the second in Punjab with Taxila as its capital, the third in Mathura where it ruled for about 2 centuries, the fourth in western India which continued till the 4th and 5th century AD in the upper Deccan. In about 58 BC, we hear of a king of Ujjain who defeated Sakas and called himself Vikramaditya, and an era called Vikrama Samvat is reckoned from the event of his victory over the Sakas. The Saka governors were called satraps. Nahapana was a great Saka satrap, and another Saka satrapi was at Ujjaina. The term satrap, S-A-T-R-A-P, satrap or satrap, which was originally used for the governor, became so popular that even when the governor became independent, they called themselves satrap. Rudraman I was perhaps most important king of Saka dynasty at Ujjain. He ruled not only over Sindh, but also over good part of Gujarat, Konkan, the Narmada Valley, Malwa and Kathiawar. The Junagarh rock inscription, which he issued in Sanskrit, is a long panegyric recording his marital exploits and his reconstruction of the great lake Sudarshana at Girnar, Saurashtra. This inscription is among the earliest dated records of ancient India. The Parthians. Towards the end of the 1st century BC, the Parthians, or Pahalvas, P-A-H-L-V-A-S, gained suzerainty of northwest by conquering many parts from the Indo-Greek kings. The Parthians seems to have come from Iran because they have Iranian names. The first Pahalava ruler was Mithridates, and he is said to have conquered the territory between the Indus and Jhelum from Demetrius. The most important king of this dynasty was Gondophares, whose period is 220 BC to 45 AD, and during whose rule St. Thomas is said to have come to India. The Kushans. The rule of Pahalvas in northwest was replaced by Yueh-Chih tribe in northwest, who by appearance looked Turkish type, but like the Sakas, they appear to have spoken an Iranian language. For a century or more, they dwelt in Bactria and the neighboring regions of Central Asia, divided into 5 autonomous provinces until control was consolidated in the hands of Kujula Kadphises of the tribe of Ujjain. The House of Kadphises, Kadphises, was succeeded by that of Kanishka. Kanishka was the most famous ruler of this dynasty, who ruled over the western half of northern India at least as far as Varanasi, and whose domains in Central Asia were very extensive. Kanishka was a great conqueror. He annexed Kashmir, defeated the Parthian king, and his war with Chinese resulted in the conquest of Kashgar, Khotan, and Jharkhand. Punjab, Kashmir, Sindh, and UP were also included in his dominions. Kanishka patronized Buddhism, and he held a great and fourth Buddhist council at Kashmir, where doctrines of Mahayana Buddhism were finalized under the guidance of Vasumitra and Ashwaghosha. At its height, the Kushan Empire extended from Oxus to Ganga, from Khorasan in Central Asia to Varanasi in UP, a good part of Central Asia, a portion of Iran, a portion of Afghanistan, almost the whole of Pakistan, and almost the whole of northern India were brought under one rule by the Kushans. The early Kushan kings issued numerous gold coins, which were found mainly west of the Indus. But the inscriptions of Kushan are distributed not only in northwestern, but also in Mathura, Sravarti, Kaushambi, and Varanasi. Kushan coins, inscriptions, constructions, and pieces of sculpture found in Mathura show that it was their second capital, the first being Purushpura or Peshawar, where Kanishka built a monastery and huge stupa. Kanishka's court was adorned by the celebrated Buddhist teacher Parsava and Vasumitra, the great Buddhist poet and philosopher Ashwaghosha, the well-known philosopher Nagarjuna, and the physician Charaka. Impact of Central Asian contacts. The invaders from Central Asia became the integral part of Indian society in course of time. They introduced use of burnt brick. Their pottery was redware, and they introduced better cavalry and the use of riding horse on a larger scale. The contacts with Central Asia were established very firmly, and as a result, India received a good deal of gold from Altai mountains in Central Asia. The Kushana kings were the first to issue gold coins in India on a wide scale. This period was also the most flourishing period in the history of crafts and commerce in ancient India. The Milinda Panho enumerates 75 occupations, 60 of which are connected with various kinds of crafts. There were at least 24 guilds of artisans. These guilds acted as bankers, financiers, and trustees. Indian iron and steel were exported to Abyssinian ports. Mathura was a great center for the manufacture of a special type of cloth, Sathaka, Sathaka. The chief article of export from India were spices, perfume, pearls, copper, sandalwood. The principal imports were cloth, glass, silver, gold. Indians' most lucrative trade was with Roman Empire. Central Asia was open to trade, and one trade route became famous later as the Old Silk Route.
The Gupta Age. The Gupta dynasty came to power sometime about 275 AD after the Kushan power came to an end around 230 AD. The Kushans were succeeded by Murundas for a while, but ultimately Gupta dynasty came to power in North India. Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, Chandragupta II, Kumargupta I, and Skandagupta were the main rulers of this dynasty. The first two kings of this dynasty were Sri Gupta and Ghatotkacha. Ghatotkacha was succeeded by his son Chandragupta I in about 320 AD. He strengthened his power by matrimonial alliances with Licchavis. The origin of Guptas are obscure. It is possible that they had common origins because much prominence has been given to the marriage of Licchavis princess with Chandragupta in the genealogies of later Gupta kings, and special coins were minted to commemorate her marriage to Chandragupta I. Chandragupta I started Gupta era in AD 320. One important act of Chandragupta I was holding of an assembly of councillors and members of royal family, at which Prince Samudragupta was formally nominated successor in about 355 AD. Samudragupta 335 to 380 AD. Samudragupta has been called the Indian Napoleon by V.A. Smith because of his extensive military conquest, about which we know from the eulogic inscription composed by his minister and court poet Harisena on an old Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. According to the inscription, he subjugated 5 kingdoms in Lower Bengal, Upper Assam, Nepal, and territories further west, as well as a number of republican clans including the Malwas, the Yodhyas, the Arjunayanas, the Abhirs in Punjab and Rajasthan, and several minor ones in Madhya Pradesh. It seems that Samudragupta directly ruled over a vast territory roughly from Brahmaputra to the Chambal, surrounded by a number of tributary states immediately to the north, east and west. The Sakas and Kushans, who ruled in Punjab and Gujarat, though independent, had to be submissive to him. Some of the coins of Samudragupta represent him as playing on the veena. He also performed Ashwamedha sacrifice. Chandragupta II. Chandragupta II is the most famous king of Gupta dynasty. His era is considered as a golden age in Indian history. He succeeded Samudragupta in 375 AD. Chandragupta II followed the same policy of matrimonial alliances. He conciliated the Naga chieftain by marrying Princess Kuber Naga. He also allied with Vaktakas of Deccan by marrying his daughter Prabhavati with Rudrasena II. About 409 AD, Chandragupta II invaded the Saka kingdom of Gujarat and Kathiawar, killed the Saksa chief Rudrasimha III, and annexed his kingdom. This extended Gupta kingdom up to the shores of Arabian Sea in the west, and this facilitated the direct cultural and commercial relations of Gupta with the Western world. The Mehroli iron pillar inscriptions near Qutub Minar enumerates the exploits of a king called Chandragupta II. According to the inscription, the king established his authority in northwestern India and in Bengal. Chandragupta II assumed the title of Vikramaditya. The court of Chandragupta II was adorned by many scholars like Kalidas and Amar Sinha. During his reign, Chinese pilgrim Fa Hien visited Kumar Gupta in India. Kumar Gupta I and Skandagupta. Kumar Gupta succeeded his father in about 415 AD, and he kept the empire intact. The Gupta Empire by this time extended from North Bengal to Kathiawar and from Himalayas to Narmada. A number of inscriptions shed light on Kumar Gupta's efficient administration and the deep love that people had for him. But in last years of Kumar Gupta's reign, peace and prosperity of the empire was disturbed due to invasions of Huns. Huns were a Central Asian people who were threatening Europe at about the same time. The Huns had occupied Bactria some time before, and now, like the earlier Greek Sakas and Kushans, they crossed the mountains and attacked the plains of India. Kumar Gupta died during a war with Hunas. He was succeeded by Skandagupta, who succeeded in re-establishing the Gupta Empire, and by end of 455 AD, it was again at peace, but after death of Skandagupta, the golden days of the Gupta Empire were over. The central control weakened and the local governors became feudatory kings with hereditary rights. The attack of Hunas started vigorously once more at the close of the 5th century AD. This time there was no strong ruler to repel these attacks. For some 30 years, from 500 AD onwards, western India was in the hands of the Huna kings. Toramana and Mihirukula were two mighty Hun monarchs who advanced up to Gwalior and Iran in Madhya Pradesh. According to Hyun Sang, Mihir Kula was a fierce persecutor of Buddhism, and in Kashmir memories of his sadistic tyranny were still alive. In the 12th century, when they were recorded by the historian Kalahana. But a great ruler, Yashodharman, rose to defeat and stop the Hunas, but he also destroyed the Gupta Empire. The official record of Yashodharmana is engraved at pillars in Mandasar. According to these inscriptions, the suzerainty of Yashodharmana was acknowledged over the vast area bounded by the Himalayas, the Brahmaputra, the Mahendra mountain in the Ganjam district, and the Arabian Sea. Although this may be an exaggeration, but it is a fact that the Gupta Empire was practically destroyed by the victories of Yashodharman, but Yashodharman's empire did not survive his death. The breakup of Gupta Empire was followed by the rise of a large number of states. Magadha was ruled by the line of kings with names ending with Gupta. They are called later Guptas to distinguish them from the imperial Guptas. Administration. The period of imperial Guptas is termed as the Golden Age of ancient India. The large part of northern India was consolidated under one political authority. An efficient system was established under Gupta Empire. Although king possessed extensive powers, he did not rule in a tyrannical manner. A council of ministers and several civil officials assisted the king. The king acted as fountainhead of justice and decided all disputes. Land revenue was the chief source and generally fixed at 1/8 of the produce. The police security system was highly efficient, and the travelers experienced no difficulty or danger from the thieves on their journey. The country was divided into provinces called bhuktis and a number of districts called visyas. The local units enjoyed much liberty and independence. The standing army of king was supplemented by the forces occasionally supplied by the feudatories. The civil and criminal law for the first time were clearly defined and demarcated. The most important officers in Gupta Empire were Kumaramatyas. Society, religion and economy in Gupta times. The Brahmins became rich under Guptas as a result of many land grants to them. The castes and subcastes increased greatly in numbers as a result of the Indian society, but a new class of untouchables called Chandalas came into existence during this period. According to Fahian, these untouchables faced many disabilities, like they lived outside the village and were not allowed to enter the town. The position of women declined during this period, and they were disallowed formal education and inheritance of property. By Gupta times, Bhagavatism and Vaishnavism overshadowed Mahayana Buddhism. Idol worship in the temples became a common feature of Hinduism from the Gupta period onwards. The Shakti cult gave rise to consorts to gods and goddesses like Lakshmi, Parvati, Durga, etc. Shakti cult gave rise to consorts to gods and goddesses. Gupta issued largest numbers of gold coins, which were called dinars in their inscriptions. Cowries, according to Fahian, became common medium of exchange. Compared to the early period, we find a decline in the long-distance trade during Gupta period. The trade with Southeast Asia gained importance, art and craft. In the history of temple architecture, the Gupta period is the formative and creative age which heralds the two styles of Nagara and Dravida. The rock-cut architecture of this period is represented by two conventional types of Chaitya and Vihara, and they are mostly found at Ajanta, Ellora and Bagh. The most characteristic features of a Chaitya is its emphasis on a colossal image of Buddha seated between two attendants. The Vihara was planned in the row of cells around the central court. The most Vihara caves at Ajanta. These caves are remarkable for the variety and beauty of the pillars, as well as the walls and ceilings are decorated. From Gupta period onwards, the free-standing temples of Hindus have also survived. These temples were small and most had flat roofs. The finest Gupta temple was that of Deoghar, in which iron dowels were used to hold the masonry together, and a small tower rose above the sanctum. The Gupta period marked great development in the domain of sculpture. The Gupta sculpture suggests simplicity and serenity. Over 2-meter high bronze image of Buddha has been recovered from Sultanganj near Bhagalpur. The beautiful image of Buddha were fashioned after Sarnath and Mathura during Gupta period. For the first time in Gupta period, we get the images of Vishnu, Shiva and some other gods. The best specimen of Hindus' sculptures are to be found in the temple of Deoghar, which contains Hindus' mythological themes of Rama, Vishnu and Narayana. The art of painting also reached new heights during the Gupta period. Specimens of Gupta paintings are preserved in the Ajanta and the Bagh caves. Out of the 29 caves, the paintings in 6 caves have survived. The subjects of these paintings are threefold, relating to decoration, portraiture and narration. The decorative designs include an infinite variety of animals, trees and flowers. In the portraits, the central figures are those of various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The narration scenes mostly portray Jataka stories. Other than this, the whole of natural and human drama, like princesses in their palaces, ladies in their havens, coolies carrying burden over their shoulders, etc., is also portrayed vividly in murals of Ajanta. The chief characteristic of Gupta art is refinement, simplicity, and religious virtuosity. Literature in Gupta period. The Sanskrit language came to have a great importance during Gupta period due to influence of Brahmanism. Sanskrit became the official language of Guptas, and it was also the language of higher classes. The plays of Bhasa and Kalidas belong to this period. Ramayana and Mahabharata were also compiled during this period. The earlier Puranas and various Smritis were also compiled during this period. The compilation of Amar Kosha by Amar Sinha, who was a luminary in the court of Chandragupta II, was also done during this period. Science and technology. The metallurgical skills of Gupta period were very high. This is evident from discovery of colossal copper statues of Buddha and an iron pillar near New Delhi. Mathematics and astronomy also saw great development during this period. The Indian notational system was adopted by Arabs who took it to the West. The concept of zero had been also developed. Aryabhatta calculated the value of pi and the length of a solar year with a remarkable degree of accuracy. Varahamira was astronomer in 6th century who stated that moon rotates around earth and earth rotates around the sun. The science of medicine was also developed, and Vagabhat was a renowned physician of this time. The post-Gupta period. After the Hunas were confined to a very small pocket, Yasodharman ruled North India for a brief period. But the rule of Yashodharman was very brief, and Gupta kingdom disintegrated. The Maitrakas of Vallabhi, Mukharis of Kannauj, the later Guptas and gods of Bengal succeeded him. The founder of Maitraka clan was Bhatraka. They ruled the Saurashtra or the Kathiawar region, and the capital was Vallabhi. The most important family of Makharis of Kannauj flourished in Gangetic Valley. The first important member of this branch was Ishana Varman, who claimed victory over the Andhras, the Sulikas of Orissa, and the Gauds. The later Guptas gained control of these territories, which had not been formed into independent kingdoms. The first powerful and independent ruler of this dynasty was Kumar Gupta. The power of later Guptas came to an end towards the middle of 8th century AD. Among the Gauls of Bengal, the most famous ruler was Sasanka, who fought against the ruler of Thaneshwar and Kannauj. Not much is known about the history of Gauds before and after Sasanka. Harshavardhan. According to Harshacharita of Banabhat, Harshavardhan belonged to the Pushyabhuti kingdom of Thaneswar. The Pushyabhuti kingdom was founded by Narvardhan around 6th century AD. Under Prabhakarvardhan, the kingdom grew in territory and influence. The daughter of Prabhakarvardhan and sister of Harsharajyashree was married to Grahavarman, the Mukhari ruler. Grahavarman was murdered by Devagupta of Malwa, and Rajyashree was imprisoned by him. The elder brother of Harsharajyavardhan defeated Devagupta, but he died fighting the Bengal king Sasanka. Therefore, Harsha succeeded to the throne at the age of 16. Harsha searched and found out her sister Rajyashree, and on her refusal to take up responsibility of ruling, he decided to continue as a ruler. Harsha transformed his capital from Thaneshwar to Kannauj and conquered the 5 kingdoms of North India: Punjab, Kannauj, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. He defeated the king of Vallabhi, Dhruvasena, and later married his daughter to him. Harsha now turned towards Deccan, where he came face to face with the Chalukyan ruler of Vatapi, Pulkesin II. The battle was fought between the two at the bank of Narmada, at which Pulkesin II came out victorious. Some historians believe that Harsha had conquered the territories of Nepal, Sindh, and Kashmir. Chinese pilgrim Husain Sang visited India during Harsha's reign. He came to study at Nalanda and collected Buddhist texts. He left India in 643 AD. He spent about 8 years in the dominions of Harsha and earned his friendship. Polity and society under Harsha. Harsha ruled his kingdom with the help of a central ministry and a secretariat comprising various departments. The provinces called Bhuktis were divided into various districts called Vaishyas. The criminal law was more severe than it had been in the Gupta period. The caste system was rigid. The city of Kannauj under Harsha became the premier city of northern India. Huan Sang has left a detailed account of a great assembly held at Kannauj in 643 AD and attended by representatives of Hinduism and Jainism besides kings. Harsha was a great patron of learning. He made large endowments to Nalanda and extended patronage to men of literature and was himself a poet. His court was adorned by Banabhatta, the author of Harshacharita and Kadambari. Harsha himself wrote 3 well-known dramas, the Ratnavali, the Nagananda, and the Priyadarshika. Harsha died in 647 AD, and his kingdom was once again broken up into many petty states. The kingdom of Deccan had become powerful by now. Small kingdom of the Deccan. The Vaktakas and Iksavakus, who followed Satvahanas, and the Chalukyas, Silahas, Kadambas, and Hoyslas were among the small kingdoms of Deccan. The Vaktakas. Till the rise of Chalukyas, Vaktakas controlled parts of Deccan and central India. The founder of this dynasty was Vindhya Shakti Chandragupta II, is said to have given his daughter Prabhavati in marriage to Vaktaka king Rudrasen II. The king Harisena of Vaktaka dynasty is said to have made extensive conquests. The Vaktaka power was destroyed by Kalachuris and Kadams towards the middle of the 6th century. Iktavashkus arose in the eastern part of the peninsula. They began providing lands as grants in the Krishna Guntur regions where the copper plate charters have been found. Their rule ended with their conquest by Pallavas. Chalukyas of Vatapi or Badami. The Chalukyas grew powerful in Deccan towards the middle of 6th century AD. The dynasty had two branches, the Chalukyas of Badami or Vatapi and Chalukyas of Kalyani. The rule of Chalukyas of Badami started in early 6th century AD, and its first rulers were Jayasingha and Ranaraja. The first independent ruler of this dynasty was Pulkesin I, and the most famous ruler was Pulkesin II. Pulkesin II was also called Satyasraya and was a contemporary of Harshavardhana. The Aihole inscription tells that Pulkesin II overcame the much internal and external disturbances. He established his influence over the whole Deccan from Narmada to the Kaveri. The greatest achievement of Pulkesin II was his victory over Harshvardhana in 620 AD. Pulkesin II also defeated the Pallava king Mahendravarman, with whom they were involved in a long battle. He was able to unify a large part of South India. Pulkesin II was probably killed by the Pallava king Narsimhavarman in 642 AD. His son Vikramaditya, who was able to recover his paternal dominions, succeeded him. The sovereignty of Chalukyas came to an end in about 757 AD when Rashtrakuta chief Danti Durga defeated Kirtivarman II and Chalukyas lost Maharashtra. The long struggle of Chalukyas with Pallavas exhausted the strength of Chalukyas and led to their ultimate fall. A dynasty was founded by Pulkesin II's brother Kubj Vishnuvardhana at the ancient city of Vengi. These Chalukyas were called Eastern Chalukyas of Vengi. The hostilities between Rashtrakutas and Chalukyas of Vengi were very strong. Vijayaditya III, 848 to 892 AD, is credited with victories over Pallavas, the Pandyas, and the Rashtrakutas. The kingdom of Eastern Chalukyas was annexed in 1076 AD by Kulotunga Chola. Western Chalukyas of Kalyani. After a lapse of 200 years, the rule of the second branch of the Chalukyas of Kalyani began. Their reign lasted for about 200 years, 973 to 1190 AD. The kingdom was established by Taila II in 973 AD when he defeated the last Rashtrakuta king Amoghavarsa Someswara I, who was involved in a protracted war with the Cholas, and Someswara II were other kings of this dynasty. But the greatest ruler of Western Chalukyas was Vikramaditya II Tribhuvanamala, whose period is 1076 to 1126 AD. He is hero of the literary work Vikramadeva Charita by Bilhana. He introduced Chalukya Vikrama era in 1076 AD and fought successfully against the Chalukyas of Anhilvara. The dynasty ceased to exist by the middle of the 13th century. The Chalukyan king was great patron of art and letter. Much of the paintings and sculptures of the Ajanta and Ellora caves were completed during their reign. The Chalukyan temple style have two components, the Vimana and the Mandapa. The temples are characterized by plastic ornamentation on their external surfaces and intricately carved pillars, ceilings and door frames. The famous temples of Chalukya's period are the Virupaksha temple at Pattadhaka near Badami, the Vishnu temple of Badami, the Shiv temple of Maguti, and the Kashi Vishwara temple of Lakundi. Rashtrakutas. Danti Durga was the founder of Rashtrakuta dynasty. He overthrew Chalukyas of Badami in about the middle of 8th century AD. However, the Rashtrakuta power reached its peak in the rule of Dhruva Nirupama, whose period of rule is 780 AD to 793 AD. He succeeded in establishing his rule in Deccan. He was succeeded by his son Govind III Jagatunga, who in turn was succeeded by Amoghavarsa I, who is said to have defeated Cholas, and the Hoysala king Vishnuvardhana. With the rise of the Yadavas of Devagiri and the Hoysalas, the Chalukya built the city of Manyakheta as his capital. The great ruler of Rashtrakuta dynasty was Krishna III, whose period is 936 to 967 AD. Krishna III occupied Kanchi and Tanjore and defeated the Chola army at the Battle of Takkolam in 949 AD. After 967 AD, the Rashtrakutas were replaced by the later Chalukyas. Achievements of Rashtrakutas. The Rashtrakuta rulers were great patrons of art and literature. Krishna I built the famous rock-cut Kailasha temple at Ellora in the latter half of the 8th century AD. The cave's shrine of Elephanta was built on an island near the west coast. Amoghar Vasa is said to have written the earliest book of poems in Kannada. Gangas. The kingdom of Ganga was founded by Didiya, who was also called Kongani Varman and Madhava in the 4th century AD. The Ganga are believed to have belonged either to the line of Ikshvakus or with the Kanvas. Durvinita was one notable Ganga ruler who distinguished himself in warfare with Pallavas. In 8th and 9th centuries, the Gangas had to encounter conflict with Chalukyas of Vengi and the Rashtrakuta ruler Dhruva Nirupama. By 1004 AD, the Ganga sovereignty had ended. The capital of Ganga was Kuluvula, which was later transferred to Talakad by Harivarman. During the reign of Rajamala IV, whose period of rule is 977 to 985 AD, a 58 feet high statue of Gomateshwara was erected at Sravanbelagola in 983 AD. Yadavas. Yadavas rose to prominence after the decline of the Chalukyas of Kalyani. The first noteworthy figure of Yadava dynasty was Bilama V, who made Devgiri his capital. His successor was Jaitrapal I, who killed the Kakatiya ruler Rudradeva. The great Brahmana minister Hemadri, renowned for his Hindu Dharamshastra, flourished during the reign of Mahadeva and Ramachandra. His most important work is Chaturvarga Chintamani. During the reign of Ramachandra, the army led by Alauddin Khilji, who was then governor of Kara, invaded Devagiri in 1294 AD. Kakatiyas. Kakatiyas were feudatories of later Chalukya who rose to power in Telangana after the decline of Chalukyas. Warangal was their seat of power. The Kakatiyas rose into prominence under Ganpati, who ascended the throne in 1199 AD. Ganapati successfully overcame Cholas, Kalingas, Yadavas, etc. Ganapati was succeeded by his daughter Rudrambha in 1261 AD, who was succeeded by her grandson Prataparudradeva. The work Prataparudriya of Vaidyanath, a work of politics, has been dedicated to him. Prataparudradeva had to submit finally to the Muslim invader Malik Kafur. Kadambas. The founder of Kadambas dynasty was Mayurasaranam, who, annoyed by the Pallavas, established his rule in Karnataka with Banavasi as his seat of government. During the reign of Kakusthavarman, the Kadamba dominion and influence grew rapidly. The Chalukyan ruler Pulkesin I and Pulkesin II conquered large part of their dominions. Hoysalas. The founder of Hoysala dynasty was Hala. The Hoysala attained dominant position with the rule of Bitiga Vishnu Vardhana in the beginning of 11th century AD. He transferred his capital from Velapura to Dwarasamudra or Helibid. He is believed to have humbled the Cholas, the Pandyas, the Kadambas, etc. The next important ruler of his house was Veer Balala I. The last Hoysala ruler was Veer Balala III. The Hoysala kingdom was ravaged by Malik Kafur in 1130 AD. The Hoysalas built the Kesava temple at Belur, which is dedicated to Vishnu, and Hoysaleswara temple dedicated to Shiva at Dwar Samudra. History of South India. The region that lies between the south of the two rivers Krishna and Tungabhadra is South India. There are references to the Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas in the inscription of Ashoka and Kharavela as well as in the Indica of Megasthenes, but the details about the people of South India in the beginning of historical period are gleaned from Sangam literature. The Sangam was a college or assembly of Tamil poets held under royal patronage. The Sangam is into two groups, the narrative and the didactic. The narrative text is called Melekanaku and comprises of 8 anthologies and 10 ideals. The didactic works are called Kilkanaku and comprises of 18 minor works. Tradition has it that the first of 3 Sangams was attended by gods and sages, and all its word has perished. The only work which has survived of second Sangam is Tolkapiyam of the grammar of Tamil. The poet of third Sangam wrote 8 anthologies called Ettu Togati. The 18 minor works called Kilakannaku are moralizing in character. The 2 famous of these works are Tirukural and Naladiyar. Tirukural is sometimes called the Bible of the Tamil land. The Naladiyar is more formal and literary in style and contains verses of much merit and high ethical content. By 6th century, the Aryan influence had penetrated whole of Tamil land. The indigenous style of poetry was rapidly alternating under the influence of Sanskrit, and Tamil poets took to writing long poems. The earliest and greatest of these is Silapadikaram, which according to tradition was authored by Ilango Vadigal, a grandson of great Chola king Karikalan, who lived in 1st or 2nd century AD. A little late was composed its sequel, Sattan of Madurai. A third Tamil epic is Jivika Chintamani, written by a Jaina, Tiruthakkadewar. 3 early kingdoms in South India. The 3 earliest kingdoms in South India were the Pandyas, the Cholas and the Cheras. The Pandyas' territory occupied by the southernmost and southeast portion of the Indian peninsula, which included roughly the modern district of Tindaveli, Ramnad and Madurai in Tamil Nadu. Madurai was the capital of Pandya kingdom. It had trade relations with Roman Empire and sent embassies to Roman Empire. The Brahmins enjoyed considerable influence, and the Pandyan kings performed Vedic sacrifices. The Cholas' kingdom was situated between the Pennar and Velar rivers. The chief center of power lay at Urayuvur, a place famous for cotton trade. The famous king in this period of Chola rule was Karikala, who founded Puhar of Kaveri Pattanam. Puhar, the Chola capital, was a great center of trade and commerce, and excavations show it had a large dock. The Chola power declined subsequently by attacks from Cheras and Pandyas. It was finally wiped out by attacks from north by Pallavas, whose capital was at Kanchi. From 4th to 9th century, Cholas played only a marginal role in South Indian history. They came to power again in 9th century and dominated South India history for almost 4 centuries thereafter. We will discuss this later on. The Chera or Kerala country was situated to the west and north of the land of Pandyas. The greatest Chera king was Sengutuvan, who is credited with having invaded the north and crossed the Ganga after the 2nd century AD. The Chera power declined, and we hear no more of it until the 8th century AD. Now we shall discuss in detail the 2 major kingdoms in South Indian history. These 2 kingdoms are Pallavas and Cholas of later period. The Pallavas. The period of Pallavas extended from 3rd century AD to 9th century AD, and the rise of Pallavas coincided with the decline of the Chola, Chera and Pandya kingdom. The origin of Pallavas is obscure, and there are many theories about their origin. According to some, they were descendants of Greeks, Parthians. According to others' theory, they were a local clan which grew after the decline of Andhra dynasty in the Deccan, etc. The capital of Pallavas was at Kanchi to the south of Madras. A Pallava king, Vishnu Gopa, was captured by Samudragupta and then liberated. Towards the end of 6th century, the Tamil Nadu land was divided between Pallavas and the Pandyas. Simha Vishnu, whose period is from 575 to 600 AD, extended the Pallava kingdom up to the river Kaveri. He was a Vaishnava, and in the Varvaha cave at Mamalapuram, a magnificent relief representing the king and his 2 consorts have been found. His son Mahendravarman I was defeated by the Chalukyan king Pulkesin II, and with this the great struggle between Chalukyans of Vatapi and Pallavas started, which continued for generations. Narasimhavarman I, whose period is 630 to 668 AD and who was son of Mahendravarman, is regarded as the most successful Pallava king. He occupied the Chalukyan capital Vatapi and probably killed Pulkesin II. He sent two expeditions to Ceylon and placed a nominee of his own on the throne of that island. The Chinese pilgrim Huan Sang visited Kanchi during this period. The Pallavas fought continuously with Chalukyas during the 7th and 8th century. They also had to fight Pandyas and the Rashtrakutas. The Rashtrakuta king Govind III invaded the Pallavas' kingdom and defeated its ruler Dantivarman. The Pallava power was finally wiped out by Aditya I Chola, who defeated Aparakitavarman and annexed the Pallava kingdom. After the eclipse of early Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas, the history of southernmost India is not clear. However, the Kalbharas revolt in 6th century is an important event which affected not only Cheras and Pandyas but the Pallavas as well. The Kalbharas are said to have overthrown innumerable kings and established their hold on the Tamil land. They also stopped Brahmadeya rights granted to the Brahmins in numerous villages. The Kalbharas' revolt was so widespread that it could be put down only through the joint efforts of the Pandyas, the Pallavas and the Chera kings. Pallava art. The Pallavas are credited for bridging the transition from rock architecture to structural stone temples. The Pallavas' temples are sometimes classified into 4 architectural styles. The first is called Mahendra style after the great royal artist Mahendravarman I. In this style we see the influence of cave style of architecture. The second style is called Mamala style. These temples are found near Mahabalipuram, founded by Narasimhavarman. These temples are complete with details of an ordinary temple. The third style is called Rajasimha style. The most famous temple of the style is the Kailash temple of Kanchi. It has a pyramidal tower flat-roofed mandapam. The fourth style is a Parajita style, which is more ornate and resembles the Chola architecture. The Panch Pandava cave temple, the Shore temple at Mahabalipuram and the Kailash Nath temple at Kanchipuram are some of the famous temples of Pallava period. The imperial Cholas, 850 to 1200. We discussed earlier that Chola kingdom was amongst the earliest of South Indian kingdoms, but from their decline in 4th century AD, they played only a marginal role in the history of South India till 9th century AD when they once again rose to power. The founder of the Chola dynasty was Vijayalaya, who captured Tanjore in 850 AD. By end of 9th century, his successor Aditya I Chola wiped out Pallavas of Kanchi and weakened the Pandyas, thus bringing the southern Tamil country under his control. The greatest Chola rulers were Rajaraja I, whose period was 985 to 1014 AD, and his son Rajendra, whose period was 1014 to 1044 AD. Rajaraja destroyed Chera navy at Trivandrum and attacked Ceylon. He also captured the Pandya capital Madurai and annexed the northern part of Sri Lanka. He also conquered Maldive Islands. The son and successor of Rajaraja, Rajendra I, continued with the annexationist policy by overrunning Pandya and Chera kingdom and including them in his empire. He also annexed rest of Sri Lanka, which remained under Cholas for 50 years. He sent an expedition against the Pala king Mahipala of Bengal by crossing Ganga and defeated him. In commemoration of this event, he assumed the title of Gangai Konda and founded a capital called Gangai Konda Cholapuram. He sent expedition against Sri Vijaya Empire, also called Sumatra, and conquered a number of places in Sumatra. The Chola navy was the strongest in the area for some time. The Chola Empire remained undiminished till 1115 AD under Kulothungan I, except for loss of Ceylon, and included the entire country south of Krishna and Tungabhadra. But the Chola Empire shrank after it, and at the beginning of the 13th century, the Chola Empire tottered. Their place was taken by Pandyas and Hoysalas in the south, while the place of later Chalukyas was taken by Yadavas and Kakatiyas. For a century after this, the history of South India is the history of these four kingdoms who were engaged in continuous battles with each other. The Muslim invasion of the Deccan, which began towards the end of the 13th century, upset all these four kingdoms and caused a period of confusion, which was terminated by rise and expansion of the Bahamani and Vijayanagar kingdom in the second quarter of the 14th century. Chola administration. The dominant form of government in Chola administration was hereditary, and it was more centralized than that of Chalukyas. The Chola administration machinery was an elaborate and complicated bureaucracy comprising officials of various grades. The offices tended to become hereditary. For purpose of administration, the Chola Empire was divided into convenient divisions. The division in descending order being Valandu or Mandalam, Nadu and Kurram. All land was carefully surveyed and divided into tax-bearing and non-taxable lands. The village as a whole was responsible for the payment of the entire revenue due from it to the king's officers. But the most important feature of Chola administration was the functioning of autonomous rural institutions. The Uttara Merur inscription is the most famous in this regard, which tells in detail about the functioning of these autonomous institutions. Society and economy during Chola rule. Caste consciousness was prominent in social relationship. The society was divided into Brahmins and non-Brahmins who were more or less working for them. The center of social and economic life at this time was the temple. Temple was center of education in Sanskrit, and to some large temple colleges were attached. One more important point regarding caste structure in South India was the little mention of Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, while the Shudras were prominent. The economy during the early part of this period was self-sufficient and no large-scale surplus was produced, but with the rapid development of trade under Cholas, this scenario changed. Overseas trade was the strength of the Chola merchants. Mahabalipuram, Kaveri Pattanam, Shaliyur and Korkai on the east coast and Ceylon on the Malabar coast had elaborate establishment controlling the South India trade both eastwards and westwards. Trade was controlled by merchant guilds, and the king and the higher officials of state invested in the guilds.
Let us now discuss some important facts relating to the prehistory of India. The term Neolithic was coined by Sir John Lubbock in his book Prehistoric Times, first published in 1865. The term denotes an age in which stone implements were made more skillfully and were more varied in form than earlier. V. Gordon Childe defined the Neolithic Chalcolithic culture as a self-sufficient food economy. Miles Burkitt put forward the following four characteristics a culture should fulfill to be known as a Neolithic culture. 1. Agriculture practice. 2. Animal domestication. 3. Grinded and polished stone tools. And 4. Pottery manufacture. Chalcolithic cultures of India. Name: Kayatha. Location: Ujjain district, Madhya Pradesh. Period: 2000 to 1800 BC. Ahar or Banas. Location: Udaipur district, Rajasthan. Period: 2000 to 1400 BC. The Savalda. Location: Dhulia district, Maharashtra, from 2000 to 1800 BC. Malwa. Location: Malwa region of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, 1700 to 1200 BC in central India and 1700 to 1400 BC in Maharashtra. Prahas. Location: Dhulia district, Maharashtra, 1800 to 1500 BC. Rangapur, location Gujarat, 1400 to 700 BC. Jorve, location Ahmednagar, Maharashtra, 1400 to 700 BC. And Chirand, location Saran district, Bihar, 1500 to 750 BC. The Paleolithic culture of India developed in the Pleistocene period or the Ice Age, which lasted between 1 million and 10,000 years before the Holocene period, that is, the present geological period. The Holocene period began 10,000 years ago. The Lower Paleolithic phase existed between 250,000 BC and 1 lakh BC. The Middle Paleolithic between 1 lakh BC and 40,000 BC, and the Upper Paleolithic between 40,000 BC and 10,000 BC. The Mesolithic culture continued to be important roughly from 9,000 BC to 4,000 BC. The microliths are the characteristic tool of the Mesolithic age. Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh is a striking site of both the Paleolithic and Mesolithic paintings. The Mesolithic people lived on hunting, fishing, and food gathering. In the Balan Valley, all the three phases of the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic have been found in sequence. Adamgarh in Madhya Pradesh and Bagor in Rajasthan provide the earliest evidence for the domestication of animals. The Neolithic age, or the New Stone Age, began in 9000 BC. But in the Indian continent, the earliest Neolithic settlement was in Mehergarh in Baluchistan, Pakistan. The Mehergarh settlement emerged around 7000 BC. We will take up this topic in a later section.
Architecture in India made a beginning in whose reign? The answer is Ashoka's. The Sunga dynasty rose on the ruins of whose rule? The answer is Mauryan. The railings of the Sanchi Stupa were built in whose period? The answer is Shunga's. Kharavala belonged to which dynasty? The answer is Cheti. The Hathi Gumpa inscription is associated with whom? Answer Kharavela.
Medieval India. Northern India from the 8th century to 1200 AD. We have discussed the history of North India till the times of Harsha. After the end of Harsha's empire in northern India, two powerful kingdoms arose in its place. These kingdoms were the Palas in Bengal and the Pratihars in northern and western India. Rashtrakutas ruled the Deccan as the dominant power. There was a tripartite struggle between the Palas, Pratihars, and the Rashtrakutas for the control of Kannauj, which had replaced Patliputra as the symbol of power and prestige. We have discussed the Rashtrakutas already. Let us now come to the Palas and the Pratihars. The Pratihars. There were two branches of the Pratihars. The first was founded by Harchandra near modern Jodhpur in the middle of the 6th century AD. Another branch was at Malwa with its capital at Ujjain, and its earliest known king is Nagbhatta. The most important ruler of the Pratihars dynasty of Malwa was Bhoj, who ascended the throne in about 836 AD and assumed the titles of Mihir and Adivarha. Bhoja extended his kingdom boundary to the east and up to the Sindhu in the north. He was succeeded by Mahendrapal I around 893 AD, and in about 912 AD, Mahipal came to the throne. After Mahipal, the disintegration of the Pratihar kingdom began, and on its ruins many independent kingdoms arose, many of them of Rajput princes. The Palas. After Shashank, the chaos followed in Bengal almost for a century, but about in the middle of the 8th century, the Pala dynasty came into power. The founder of the Pala dynasty was Gopalan, who was a Buddhist. He was succeeded by Dharampal in 770 AD, who in turn was succeeded by Devpal, followed by Mahipal I. The Palas had been losing their power progressively under Dharampal and Devpal, but Mahipal I was able to restore the lost prestige of his empire to a great extent. However, by the middle of the 12th century, the Pala power had faded. The Palas were great patrons of Buddhism, and in their reign, the Tantric sect of Buddhism grew. Dharampal founded the University of Vikramsila. After the Palas, the Sena dynasty established an empire in Bengal. The greatest ruler of this dynasty was Vijayasena, under whom the whole of Bengal was united. The poet Umapatidhara lived at his court and composed the famous Devparak Prashasti. The kingdom began to disintegrate under Lakshman Sena's reign. The Muslim ruler Muhammad Bakhtiyar Khalji attacked its capital Nadia and occupied it. Soon the dynasty broke up and gave way to the Devas. The Rajputs. The origin of the Rajputs is a matter of controversy. According to Colonel Todd, they were foreign invaders like Huna, Sakas, and Kushans who adopted Hinduism and integrated into Hindu society. Rajputs themselves trace their origin to the sun or moon families mentioned in the Mahabharata. Some Rajputs profess themselves belonging to Agnikula. This theory was first put forward by Chandra Bardai in his book Prithviraj Raso. The poets of the 14th century mentioned Rajputs as a tribe comprising 36 clans. In the northern India, under the period we are discussing, some of these played an important role. The main among these were the Gadwalas, the Chauhans, the Chalukyas or the Anhilwaras, and the Chandelas. The Gadwalas. Chandradeva was the first ruler of this dynasty, who seized the throne of Ujjain sometime between 1080 to 85 AD. Govindacharya was another important ruler, and Jayachandra was the last ruler. Sanyogita was Jayachandra's daughter. Marriage by elopement to Prithviraj Chauhan is famous, although its authenticity is controversial. The Chauhans. The Chauhans were earlier feudatories of the Pratihars, who declared themselves independent in the middle of the 10th century AD. Ajay-Raj, who founded the city of Ajmer, was one famous ruler, while the other famous ruler is Vigraharaja IV. The famous Prithviraj Chauhan began his reign in 1177 AD. He was also hostile towards the Gadwala king Jayachandra. In his first confrontation with Muhammad Ghori in 1191 AD, which is also called the First Battle of Terai, he defeated Muhammad Ghori. But in the Second Battle of Terai, Prithviraj was defeated and executed. The Chauhan kingdom declined after him. The Chalukyas or the Anhilwaras. The Chalukyas or Solankis were rulers of Gujarat for about 3 centuries. The earliest of the Chalukya's ruler was Mularaja. The next important ruler was Bhima I, during whose reign Mahmud Ghazni overran Gujarat and plundered the temple of Somnath. The greatest ruler of this dynasty was Jayasimha Siddharaja, who after his victory over the Pasamarasam adopted the title of the Paramar. He was a great patron of learning, and noted Jain scholar Hemchandra was at his court. The Chandelas. The Chandelas became rulers in South Bundelkhand early in the 9th century. Their capital was at Kharjurakha, which is modern Khajuraho. The dynasty became powerful under the rule of Dhanga in the mid-10th century. Dhanga was a patron of learning and fine arts and built many temples at Khajuraho. The rule of this dynasty continued till it was annexed by Alauddin Khalji. The Paramars. The Paramar dynasty was founded by Upendra or Krishnaraja. The Paramars ruled in Malwa from the early years of the 9th century with their capital at Dhara. One famous ruler of this dynasty was Munja, who is also known by the names of Amoghavarsa, Sri Vallabh, Utpal Raja. He defeated the powerful Chalukyan king Taipad II. But the most famous ruler is Bhoj, who should not be confused with the Bhoj of the Pala dynasty in Bengal. Although Bhoja's ambition to control the Deccan was extinguished on his defeat from Jayasimha II, still he succeeded in defeating King of Chedi. He is also said to have defeated the ruler of southern Gujarat and Bhima I of Gujarat. Bhoj was a great patron of art and literature. The authorship of 23 books is ascribed to him. He was a patron of art and literature and patronized scholars like Dhanapala and Vrita. The Muslim invasion. The Muslim invasion of India had started as early as 637 AD, when Arabs started sending expeditions to the western coasts of India. Although previous expeditions failed, but in 712 AD, Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh. Sindh was under Arabs for 200 years. The Ghaznavids. The Principality of Ghazni was founded by Alpatigin in 962 AD. He was succeeded by his slave Subuktigin, who extended his empire beyond Indus by defeating the ruler of Shaya dynasty, Jaipal, twice. Subuktigin was succeeded by son Muhammad, a brilliant general and conqueror. He led as many as 17 expeditions into India during the years 1000 to 1026 AD. The expedition against the Somnath temple in Gujarat gave Muhammad a vast treasure. But Muhammad of Ghazni did not try to capture and hold territories in India. However, the conquests of Muhammad Ghazni opened India to attacks from northwest. This dynasty, to which Muhammad Ghazni belonged, was soon overthrown by Muhammad of Ghori. Muhammad Ghori. Muhammad Ghori, after setting up his government in Ghazni, directed his expeditions further towards India. He conquered Sindh and advanced towards Gujarat, where he was defeated by Mularaja, king of the Anilvaras. The next object of the Ghauris' attention was Lahore, where he defeated Khusro Malik. After this, Muhammad Ghori next turned his attention to the conquest of Hindu kingdoms. Hindu princes formed a confederacy against Ghori and placed the allied army under the command of Prithviraj Chauhan. Prithviraj defeated Muhammad Ghori in the Battle of Terai in 1911 AD. But in 1912, Prithviraj was defeated. Prithviraj Chauhan was captured and executed. The Sultan returned to Ghazni and left the Indian campaigns in the hands of his trusted lieutenant Qutubuddin Aibak. Qutubuddin in 1193 AD captured Delhi, Meerut, Ranthambore and Koli and then advanced towards Banaras. In the meanwhile, Muhammad Ghori returned from Ghazni and defeated Raja Jaichand of Kannauj in the Battle of Chandwar. Gwalior fell in 1196 AD. By the time of Ghori's death, not only Upper India but Bihar and Bengal were also conquered. There were social, political and military reasons for the defeat of the Hindu kingdom. Politically, these kingdoms involved in continued fighting with each other, which mutually weakened them. The social setup also deteriorated with increasing discrimination between one caste and another. Militarily, the Turks had superior quality horses and employed armored horsemen and mounted archers. On the other hand, the small Hindu kingdom relied on horses. Their armies lacked coordination and failed to display a united strength. Cultural development during the period. During the period, regional languages developed. The beginning of Maithili, Oriya, Bengali and Assamese are traceable in Buddhist writings. Oriya and Bengali began appearing during this period. The origin of Hindi has been traced to this period by scholars. Chand Bardai's Prithviraj Raso is an important work of this period which marks the 11th century AD. Urdu too began to emerge. Muhammad Ghazni patronized poets such as Firdausi of Shahnama. Al-Biruni, who came with Ghori, wrote Kitab-ul-Hind depicting the Indian people's thoughts and customs. Sanskrit literature also flourished during this period. Some famous works of this period are Katha Sarita Sagar of Somdeva, Vikramadeva Charita of Bilhan, Raj Tarangini of Kalhan, and Jaydev's Gita Govinda. Art and architecture. The famous temples at Khajuraho were built by the Chandelas during this period in 10th and 11th centuries. The Jaina temple of Chalukyas of Gujarat, such as Vimala, Tejpala, and the Dilwara temples at Mount Abu, also belong to this period. The Khajuraho temples have beautiful sculptures both inside and outside. The sculpture of the Pala school has unique features such as fine finish. The figures were decorated and polished extremely well. In painting the important school of Bengal and its counterpart, the Apabhramsa school in Western India continued to flourish up to the 15th century. The Sultanate of Delhi. The Slave Dynasty. On the death of Muhammad Ghori, Qutbuddin Aibak severed his ties with Ghazni and independently founded a dynasty called the Slave Dynasty. Qutbuddin strengthened his position by political matrimonial alliances. He built 2 mosques, Quwwatul Islam at Delhi and Arai Din Ka Jhopra at Ajmer. He also began the construction of the Qutub Minar. He died in 1210 AD. Iltutmish was Qutbuddin Aibak's son-in-law and succeeded him. He defeated his rivals bravely and was honored with patent of investiture from Caliph of Baghdad in 1299. It was during his reign that Mongols threatened to attack India on the issue of Khwarajim ruler. But Iltutmish averted it by refusing to give the Khwarajim ruler shelter. Iltutmish completed the structure of the Qutub Minar. He was the first ruler to adopt as his monetary standard the tanka. Razia Sultan was nominated by Iltutmish as his successor, but she had to face great opposition from nobles who put her brother on the throne. But he was a worthless ruler and Razia ultimately became the ruler. Razia revised the laws and reformed the government. However, the nobles were not reconciled to her being the ruler. She was murdered in 1240 AD near Kaithal. Ghiyasuddin Balban or Ulugh Khan succeeded the throne after 4 years of intrigue. Balban was a stern ruler and his administration policy was ruthless. He showed extreme severity to the brigands of Mewat and the revolt of Bengal. His rule continued for 38 years till his death in 1284 AD. Balban was a liberal patron of Persian literature and showed special favour to his poet Amir Khusro. After death of Balban, there was once more confusion as his grandson Kaikubad proved worthless. Ultimately, the nobles put a high-ranking official, Firoz Shah, on the throne. He became Sultan under the title Jalaluddin in 1219 AD, and thus the slave dynasty came to an end. The Khalji dynasty. Jalaluddin was a mild and generous ruler, but he put down several revolts. He also repulsed the attacks of Mongols who invaded India in 1292 AD. Jalaluddin was murdered by his nephew Alauddin Khalji, and his rule came to a tragic end. Alauddin ascended the throne in 1296 AD and started his campaigns soon after. In 1297, he attacked Gujarat, and his generals Ulugh Khan and Nusrat Khan defeated the ruler Raja Karim. Alauddin conquered subsequently Ranthambore, Chittor and Malwa by 1305 and turned his attention towards the Deccan after this. He entrusted the task of Deccan to his able general Malik Kafur. Malik Kafur first of all marched against Devagiri, defeated the ruler and captured Deval. Next, he conquered Warangal, Dwarsamudra and Madurai. He is said to have reached as far as Rameswaram. Alauddin also dealt with Mongols with an iron hand. He personally marched against the Mongol leader Kutlug Khwaja and defeated him. Alauddin was a great administrator and carried out many reforms to stop the recurring revolts. He put great checks on the nobles. He forbade the use of wine, organizing parties among nobles, and marriages without his permission. He also organized an efficient spy system and reorganized his army. But the most remarkable of Alauddin's reforms was that of market regulations. The purpose of those reforms was to benefit the army to compensate its low wages. The state's share was increased to half of the land produce. The land revenue was received in kind, and the grain was stored in royal granaries where it was used in time of need. A check on the market was kept by two officers, Diwan-e-Riyasat and Shah-e-Mandi. Alauddin also introduced price controls covering almost every item, from food grains to horses, from cattle and slaves to costly cloth. In discharge of his duties, he set aside the supremacy of ulemas and issued orders independently. Alauddin was also a patron of learning and art. The poets like Amir Khusrau and Mir Hasan Dehlvi enjoyed his patronage. He built a new city called Siri. He also built the Jamaat Khana Masjid at the Dargah of Nizamuddin Ulia and Alai Darwaza near the famous Qutub Minar. Alauddin Khalji died in 1316 AD, and his death led to usual murderous scramble for power. The Tughlaq dynasty from 1320 to 1412 AD. Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq was the governor of Punjab who was elected by the nobles to occupy the vacant throne after Alauddin Khalji's rule. He started the Tughlaq dynasty in 1320 AD. Ghiyasuddin restored order everywhere and built a strong fort near Delhi called Tughlaqabad. He strengthened defences of northwestern frontier to guard against the recurring dangers of Mughal inroads. He conquered Warangal and put down the revolt in Bengal by 1324. The Sultanate's power reached up to Madurai. Ghiyasuddin died in 1325 AD after a fall from a high-rised pavilion. Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Muhammad bin Tughlaq ascended the throne in 1325 AD after the death of his father Ghiyasuddin. He introduced many administrative reforms, although many of them failed due to his impatience. Muhammad Tughlaq tried to improve the revenue department by ordering the compilation of a register of revenue and expenditure of the provinces. He increased taxation in Doab in order to increase his resources, but the people smarting under a famine revolted and the measure had to be withdrawn. Muhammad bin Tughlaq created an agricultural department called the Diwan-e-Kohi. The main object of this department was to bring uncultivated land under cultivation by giving direct financial support from the treasury. But unfortunately, this measure too could not be implemented effectively. The other major political decision taken by Muhammad bin Tughlaq was to transfer the capital from Delhi to Devagiri in Deccan, which was renamed Daulatabad. There were politically wise reasons for this. It could have made the capital more centrally located. It was also not near to the northwest frontier, which was constantly under attack by the Mongols, and it could also establish stability in the Deccan, which was of recent conquest. However, this move also failed miserably. It was not possible to transfer huge machinery of state to another region. Besides, the population of Delhi was not willing to move to Devagiri. The other well-mooted but failed experiment of Tughlaq was monetary experiment. He ordered vast quantity of coins to be made with the same value as silver coins. But he did nothing to curb its private and unauthorized issue, and thus the issue of copper coins became the will of any individual. He led 2 expeditions to conquer Khorasan and Khawarazm, but both failed. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was a generous and learned man, and although religious, but he was free from bigotry. He knew Arabic and Persian and discussed philosophy, astronomy, logic, and mathematics. He was also a good calligrapher and maintained good relationships with foreigners. He received an envoy from Chinese ruler Timur and in turn sent Ibn Battuta to the Chinese emperor in 1347 AD. Ibn Battuta was a Moorish traveller who came to India in 1333 AD and was appointed Chief Qazi of Delhi by Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He has left an invaluable account of Muhammad bin Tughlaq's reign. He recorded his adventures in a book called Safarnama. Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Firoz Shah Tughlaq was cousin of Muhammad bin Tughlaq and ascended the throne in 1351 AD when Muhammad bin Tughlaq died. Firoz Shah was of merciful and pious disposition. He developed agriculture by reclamation of wastelands and by providing irrigation facilities. He reduced taxation to the limits prescribed by the Quran. He also mitigated severity of criminal law by abolishing torture and mutilation as a form of punishment. He also established a charitable hospital in Delhi called the Diwan-e-Khairat. Firoz Shah built a new capital at Delhi and named it Firozabad. He also founded the cities of Hisar, Fatehabad, Firozpur and Jaunpur. He also built the Kali Masjid and Lal Gumbad and brought 2 Ashoka pillars to Delhi, one from Khizarabad and the other from Meerut. Firoz Shah authored a book called Futuhat-e-Furshahi. The negative side of the Firoz Shah rule, he is said to be intolerant towards subjects of other religions. He was the first Muslim Sultan to impose jizya on the Brahmins and got the painted murals in his palace erased. He is also held responsible for the fall of the Tughlaq dynasty as he was a weak general and ruler. He revived the Jagir system or grant of land to military officers with its revenue. It is said to have proved ruinous to the kingdom. His death was followed by succession wars and only a small area around Delhi remained with the Tughlaqs. Timur's invasion. Amir Timur or Timur Lane was a mighty conqueror from Central Asia. His capital was at Samarkand. He invaded India in 1398. He occupied Delhi and remained there for 15 days and plundered Delhi mercilessly. The Tughlaq Empire could not recover from such a terrible blow and came to an end in 1412 AD. The Sayyid dynasty. The last ruler of Tughlaq dynasty was Mahmud Tughlaq, not to be confused with Muhammad bin Tughlaq. After Mahmud Tughlaq, Khizr Khan, a viceroy of Timur, assumed the throne in 1414 AD. Khizr Khan was a Sayyid, and this dynasty is called Sayyid dynasty. The rulers of this dynasty neither assumed the title of Sultan nor struck coins in their names. The last ruler, Alauddin Alan Shah, gave up the kingdom to Bahlol Lodi, the Afghan governor of Punjab, in 1452 AD. Thus began the rule of the Lodis. The Lodi dynasty. The Lodi dynasty was the first Afghan or Pathan dynasty. The founder of the dynasty, Bahlol Lodi, was an Afghan noble. The most important event of his reign was the conquest of Jaunpur. He ruled from 1451 AD to 1489 AD. Sikandar Lodi. Sikandar was the second son of Bahlol Lodi, and his real name was Nizam Khan. He was the most capable monarch of the Lodi dynasty. He conquered Bihar and Tirhut. Sikandar had a strict and an impartial administrative policy. He organized an efficient system of espionage. However, he was a religious bigot. He broke the famous Jwalamukhi temple at Nagarkot. His period of rule was from 1489 to 1517 AD. Ibrahim Lodi. Ibrahim Lodi was the eldest son of Sikandar. He ascended the throne in 1517 AD. Ibrahim was not at good terms with his nobles. Some of these nobles turned against him. There were many revolts during his reign. At last, Daulat Khan Lodi, the governor of Punjab, invited Babur, the king of Kabul, to overthrow the Lodi dynasty. Babur seized the opportunity and inflicted a crushing defeat on Ibrahim in the first battle of Panipat in 1526 AD. Thus, the Delhi Sultanate, which lasted for 320 years, came to an end. Socio-economic condition during the Delhi Sultanate period. During the Sultanate period, Muslim nobility was composed of various nationalities like Turks, Afghans, Abyssinians, Egyptians, and Arabs. There were intense hostilities between them. Therefore, this made the rule of the Sultan easier sometimes, who could play on their divisions. Muslim ulemas were a highly influential body. Alauddin Khalji was the first Sultan who checked their pretensions and disregarded their advice. The lower classes of the Muslim consisted of soldiers, clerks, and men employed in trade and industry. Slavery was a popular institution, and slaves were kept both by the sultans and the nobles. But a slave could be freed after a grant by the king, and Iltutmish and Balban were slaves at the beginning of their career. Hindus formed the vast majority of the population, and their society was caste-ridden. Child marriage and seclusion of women became a general practice, and marriage of the widow was unthinkable. The chief source of economy during the period was agriculture, trade, and commerce. Many sultans promoted agriculture as they were aware of its importance. There was widespread commerce, both internal and external. Bengal was the main center of trade with China and Southeast Asia. The balance of trade was usually always in India's favor. Administration. The Delhi Sultanate was a theocracy with Islam as the state religion. The Sultan was an absolute monarch, though he considered himself a deputy of the Khalifa. The Sultan was the chief lawgiver and the final court of appeal. The Wazir was the chief minister of the state. He was in charge of revenue and finance and controlled other departments. His office was known as the Diwan-e-Hazrat. The Diwan-e-Insha managed the correspondence. Religious matters and endowments were dealt by the Diwan-e-Rasalat. The Sadr-ul-Sadr enforced the Islamic rules and regulations and supervised charity. The head of the judicial department was the chief Qazi, who was styled as the Qazi-ul-Qazat. The task of maintaining peace and order rested with the officials known as the Kotwals, aided by the Muhatsim, who was the chief censor of public morals. The village remained the basic unit of administration. The Sultan committed the provinces to the charge of great nobles. These nobles were called Amils or Muqtas. The provinces were divided into shiks, which were in turn divided into parganas. The revenue in the Delhi Sultanate derived mainly from 1. The zakat or religious tax, which was levied only upon well-to-do Muslims. 2. Kharaj was tax on gross produce of lands of non-Muslims. 3. The Ushraf was tax on gross produce of lands held by Muslims. 4. Jizya or poll tax was imposed on adult non-Muslim males. There were other taxes like house tax, grazing tax, octroi, etc. Land revenue was most important source of revenue and was derived from Khalsa or crown lands and Iktas, which were territories granted to officers. Beginnings of Indo-Islamic culture. The cultural mingling of Indo-Islamic culture is evident in the architecture, painting, literature and music of the period. To some extent, it could be seen in religious field too. In architecture, the new features which were brought by the Turkish conquerors were 1. Dome, 2. Lofty towers, 3. The true arc unsupported by the beam, 4. The vault. They also brought with them an expert knowledge of the use of concrete and mortar, which till then had been little used in India. The famous examples of the slave dynasty architecture are Quwwatul Islam Mosque, built by Qutubuddin in Delhi, and the Qutub Minar near the mosque. A famous example from the Khilji period are the tomb of Hazrat Nizamuddin Ulia at Delhi and the Alai Darwaza built by Alauddin Khilji. The Tughlaq buildings are marked by simplicity and sobriety. The buildings are characterized by sloping walls and a dark appearance. Notable monuments from the Tughlaq period are the fort of Tughlaqabad, the tomb of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, the fort of Adilabad, etc. The tombs from the Sayyid period show characteristics such as use of blue enamel tiles, the lotus motif covering the dome, free use of guldastas, etc. The tombs from the Lodi period are hard and bare, which shows that the Lodis had limited sources. But some of their buildings show an elegance with the use of enamel tiles. One famous building of the Lodi period is the Moti Ki Masjid, erected by the Prime Minister of Sikandar Lodi. Painting. The Sultanate period painting show an attempt to arrive at a fusion of newly introduced Persian and Indian traditional styles. Many of the illustrated manuscripts show the influence of Jaina and Rajasthani painting styles. In music, the Turks brought with them a number of new musical instruments such as the rabab and sarangi, new musical modes and regulations. The Sultanate king patronized music. Balban encouraged setting up of a society of dancers and musicians. Alauddin Khilji patronized musicians such as Gopal Nayak and Amir Khusrau. Amir Khusrau is also credited with the invention of the sitar. Firoz Shah Tughlaq got the Indian classical work Rag Darpan translated into Persian. Provincial kingdom after Sultanate. The Deccan had broken from the Delhi Sultanate in the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq itself. Two main powers arose in Deccan to replace the Sultanate. These were the Bahmani and Vijayanagar kingdoms. These two kingdoms fought with each other during their whole existence. The main causes of conflict between these two kingdoms were: 1. Rival claim to Raichur Doab, a fertile land between the Krishna and Tungabhadra river. 2. The desire on the part of Vijayanagar kings to get hold of the Golconda with its mines. And 3. Rivalry in Marathwada. Besides, both kingdoms had ambitious rulers who wanted to control the whole peninsula. The Bahmani kingdom from 1347 to 1526 AD. The Bahmani kingdom was founded in 1347 AD by Hasan Gangu, who had revolted and proclaimed independence from the Sultanate. He assumed the title of Alauddin Bahmani and Bahman Shah. His capital was at Gulbarga. He was succeeded by Muhammad Shah I, who was chiefly involved in wars against Vijayanagar and Warangal. Some other notable rulers of this dynasty were Firoz Shah, who defeated twice Vijayanagar but was defeated at Pangul. Ahmad Shah, who shifted the capital to Bidar, was also known on account of his association with the Sufi saint Gesu Daraj. The Bahmani kingdom saw great expansion under Khwaja Muhammad Gavan, who was minister under two Bahmani kings, Humayun and Muhammad Shah. Muhammad Gavan, in his campaign against Vijayanagar in 1481, reached up to Kanchi and overran the Halol and Goa on the western coast. Muhammad Gavan was Persian by birth and disliked by natives. He was ultimately captured and executed in 1481. The Bahmani kingdom declined in power, and in 1526 Amir Barid usurped the throne. Thus, the Bahmani dynasty came to an end. On the ruins of the Bahmani kingdom, 5 independent kingdoms arose. They were Berar, Bidar, Ahmednagar, Golconda and Bijapur. 1. The Berar kingdom was founded in 1484 AD by Fatullah. He founded Imad Shahi dynasty as he bore the title of Imad ul Mulk. The dynasty lasted about 90 years until 1574 AD, when it was annexed by Ahmednagar. 2. The Bidar became independent around the year 1492 AD under a Turkish officer, Mahmud Shah Bahmani. His son, Amir Barid, openly assumed an independent position in 1525 AD. In about 1609, Bidar was absorbed by Bijapur. 3. Ahmednagar. This kingdom was founded by Malik Ahmad in the year 1490 AD. The dynasty founded by him is known as the Nizam Shahi dynasty. He also founded the city of Ahmednagar and was involved in a long drawn-out warfare with the Mughals. In 1576 AD, Akbar decided to invade Ahmednagar, but the fort was defended by Chand Bibi, who purchased peace by surrendering Berar. But Chand Bibi was murdered by her own officer, and the Mughals annexed Ahmednagar in 1600 AD. Abyssinian minister Malik Ambar recaptured Ahmednagar in 1610 AD. Ahmednagar was finally annexed in 1637 AD by Shah Jahan. 4. Golconda. The kingdom of Golconda was founded by Quli Qutb Shah in 1512 AD. This dynasty is therefore known as the Qutb Shahi dynasty. The first sultan of this dynasty, Qutb Shah, transformed his capital from Warangal to Golconda. The other ruler sultan of this dynasty were Ibrahim Adil Shah and Muhammad Quli. The Golconda was finally annexed to Mughal Empire by Aurangzeb in 1687 AD. 5. Bijapur. Bijapur was the most important of the 5 kingdoms of the Deccan. It was founded by Yusuf Adil Shah, who waged wars against Vijayanagar and its neighbors. But its greatest achievement was the recovery of Goa from the Portuguese commander Albuquerque. During the reign of Ibrahim Adil Shah, the kingdom of Golconda, Bidar and Ahmednagar attacked Bijapur, but it was well defended by its able minister Adil Shah. Ali Adil Shah, whose period was from 1579 to 1626 AD, was perhaps the greatest of the Adil Shahi dynasty. He was a good administrator and introduced a very efficient system of revenue settlement. He was tolerant of all creeds and faiths. Vijayanagar Empire. The origins of the Vijayanagar kingdom are not clear, but according to tradition, the city was founded by the sons of Sangama, called Harihar and Bukka. According to historians, Vijayanagar was founded by Hosala king Veera Bailala III. However, it seems certain that the kingdom owed its origin to a reaction to a devastating Muslim raid threatened to overwhelm the Hindu civilization in southern India. The capital of Vijayanagar kingdom was at Hastinavati or Hampi. The Sangama dynasty. Most of Harihar's and Bukka's life was spent in waging wars against the Bahamani kingdom. Bukka died in 1379 AD and he was succeeded by his son Harihar II. During Harihar II's reign, the whole of South India, including Mysore, Kannara, Tiruchirappalli and Kanchi, were won. After his death, there was a civil war and finally his son Devaraya I ascended the throne in 1401 AD. Niccolo Conti, the Italian traveller, visited Vijayanagar in 1420. Devraya II came to the throne in 1422 AD, and in his reign the empire touched the most distant south and even touched the shores of Ceylon. It was during his reign that Persian traveller Abdur Razak visited Vijayanagar.